Yo, what's up? Welcome to Potter Vibes, where stories come alive. Buckle up because today we have Narcissa Malfoy walked into Dumbledore's office with proof he'd been stealing from the Potter vaults for 13 years, and she brought goblins. Quick favor, if you dig this content, drop a like and subscribe. It takes just a second but means so much to us. Let's roll. Chapter 1, The Unexpected Alliance. The autumn wind whistled through the ancient stones of Hogwarts, carrying with it the first bitter promise of winter. Harry Potter sat in Transfiguration class, his mind wandering as Professor McGonagall demonstrated the proper technique for transforming a teapot into a tortoise. The fifth-year students around him practiced with varying degrees of success, Hermione's tortoise already crawling across her desk with perfect shell markings, while Neville's teapot had only grown stubby legs and a hesitant head. Harry sighed, pointing his wand half-heartedly at his own teapot. Ever since Cedric's death and Voldemort's return months ago, concentrating on schoolwork seemed trivial. The Ministry's smear campaign against him didn't help matters. Each morning brought another Daily Prophet headline questioning his sanity or integrity. Mr. Potter, Professor McGonagall's voice cut through his thoughts. Perhaps you'd care to join us in the present moment. Your teapot remains disappointingly inanimate. Sorry, Professor, Harry muttered, straightening up. Just as he raised his wand again, the classroom door burst open. A pale-faced first-year Hufflepuff stood trembling in the doorway. Professor McGonagall, the boy stammered. Professor Dumbledore requests Mr. Potter's immediate presence in his office. He says it's urgent. McGonagall's lips thinned to a severe line. Very well. Potter, you're excused. Though I expect you to master this transformation before our next class. Harry exchanged puzzled glances with Ron and Hermione as he gathered his books. Wonder what that's about, Ron whispered. Hermione's brow furrowed with concern. It must be important if Dumbledore's pulling you out of class. Be careful, Harry. The walk to the headmaster's office felt unusually long. Harry's mind raced through possibilities. Had there been another Death Eater attack? Had someone else died? The knot in his stomach tightened with each step. When he reached the stone gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office, he realized he didn't know the password. Before he could guess, however, the gargoyle sprang aside of its own accord. Harry stepped onto the moving spiral staircase, the grinding of stone against stone echoing his mounting anxiety. As he approached the heavy oak door at the top, he heard raised voices from inside, something unusual enough to make him pause. One voice was clearly Dumbledore's, though lacking its usual calm assurance. The other voice, cold and precise, belonged to a woman Harry didn't immediately recognize. Absolutely inexcusable, and you know it perfectly well, Albus, the woman was saying. Narcissa, I understand your concerns, but, concerns? Is that what you call 13 years of systematic theft? The woman's voice rose sharply. The goblins don't consider it a concern. They consider it a crime. Harry's breath caught in his throat. Narcissa, as in Narcissa Malfoy. What was Draco's mother doing in Dumbledore's office? And what was this about theft and goblins? He raised his hand to knock, but before his knuckles touched wood, the door swung open on its own. The scene before him froze Harry in place. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, looking older and more defeated than Harry had ever seen him. His half-moon spectacles were slightly askew, and the customary twinkle in his blue eyes had vanished completely. Standing before the desk, her back ramrod straight and her chin tilted upward in defiance, stood Narcissa Malfoy. She looked nothing like she had at the Quidditch World Cup last year. Gone was the expression of perpetual disgust, replaced by cold fury and, startlingly, something that looked almost like righteousness. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe twist, accentuating the sharp angles of her aristocratic face. She wore formal robes of midnight blue that seemed to shimmer with subtle magic. But what truly shocked Harry was the presence of 4 goblins flanking her. They were dressed in the formal attire of Gringotts officials, scarlet and gold uniforms with the bank's crest emblazoned across their chests. Each carried a leather portfolio tucked under one arm and wore expressions of barely contained contempt as they looked at Dumbledore. "Ah, Harry," Dumbledore said softly. "Please come in." Every eye in the room turned to him. Narcissa Malfoy's gaze was particularly unsettling, calculating yet somehow not hostile. In fact, there was something in her expression that Harry had never expected to see directed at him from a Malfoy: sympathy. "What's going on, Professor?" Harry asked, stepping cautiously into the office. The door swung shut behind him with an ominous click. Dumbledore opened his mouth to respond, but Narcissa cut him off. "Mr. Potter," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I believe you should sit down for this conversation." One of the goblins, the eldest by the look of his silver-streaked hair and more elaborate uniform, stepped forward. "Mr. Potter, I am Director Ragnarok of Gringotts. We have been attempting to contact you for some time without success." He shot a pointed look at Dumbledore. "It seems our correspondence has been intercepted." "Intercepted?" Harry repeated blankly, remaining standing despite Narcissa's suggestion. "I don't understand." "That makes two of us," came a new voice from behind Harry. He turned to see Professor McGonagall entering the office, her expression severe. "Albus, when a student is summoned from my class, I expect to be informed of the reason. Especially when that student is Potter." Her eyes widened slightly as she took in the assembled goblins and Narcissa Malfoy. "What is the meaning of this?" "An excellent question, Minerva," Dumbledore replied wearily. "It seems Mrs. Malfoy has some concerns regarding Harry's inheritance." Narcissa made a sound of cold amusement. "Concerns. There's that word again." She turned to Harry, and he was struck by how intensely blue her eyes were, not icy like her son's but deep and fathomless. "Mr. Potter, for the past 13 years, Albus Dumbledore has been systematically stealing from your family vaults." The words hit Harry like a physical blow. He stared at her, then at Dumbledore, waiting for the headmaster to deny it. To explain that this was some Death Eater trick, some ploy to drive a wedge between Harry and his mentor. But Dumbledore merely closed his eyes briefly, his shoulders sagging. "That is a rather uncharitable interpretation of—" "It is not an interpretation at all," interrupted the Goblin director, opening his portfolio with sharp, efficient movements. "It is documented fact. Perhaps Mr. Potter would like to see the evidence himself." Harry's legs suddenly felt unable to support him. He sank into the chair Narcissa had suggested earlier, his mind reeling. "Evidence," he managed. Professor McGonagall moved to stand beside Harry's chair, her presence oddly comforting. "I too would like to see this evidence," she said crisply. "These are extraordinary accusations." The goblin approached, laying open the portfolio on Dumbledore's desk where they could all see. Inside were dozens of parchments, bank statements, withdrawal slips, and transfer records, all bearing the unmistakable signature of Albus Dumbledore. The Potter family was among the wealthiest in Wizarding Britain, Director Ragnarok explained, his long finger tracing down columns of figures. "What you have seen in your trust vault, Mr. Potter, is merely a fraction of your inheritance, a small account set up for your school expenses. The main Potter family vault contains, or rather, contained, significantly more." Harry stared at the documents, trying to make sense of the numbers. Galleons, properties, investments, artifacts, the list seemed endless. And beside each entry were records of withdrawals, transfers, and sales, all authorized by Dumbledore as his magical guardian. "I don't understand," Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How could you?" He looked up at Dumbledore, searching for any sign that this was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Dumbledore met his gaze steadily. "Harry, everything I did was for your protection and the greater good. The resources were used to ensure your safety, to fund the Order's activities against Voldemort, to purchase a holiday home in the south of France." Narcissa interrupted, pointing to one of the documents. "To invest in various businesses owned by your associates. To make substantial donations to the International Confederation of Wizards during your tenure as Supreme Mugwump." Please, Albus, do explain how these expenditures protected Mr. Potter. McGonagall's face had gone chalk-white. Albus, she breathed. Tell me this isn't true. The silence that followed was answer enough. Harry felt something cold and hard forming in the pit of his stomach. How? He asked, his voice steadier now as shock gave way to anger. How could you possibly have access to my family's vault? It was another goblin who answered, younger than Ragnarok, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. Headmaster Dumbledore presented himself to Gringotts on November 2, 1981, with documentation naming him as your magical guardian. As such, he was granted limited access to your accounts for the purposes of your maintenance and education. Limited access that he systematically expanded through various legal manipulations over the years, Narcissa added, her lip curling in disgust. What I don't understand, McGonagall said sharply, is why the bank allowed this to continue for 13 years. Surely Gringotts has safeguards against such irregularities. The goblins exchanged uncomfortable glances. We do, Ragnarok admitted. However, certain pressures were applied. Threats regarding stricter regulation of magical creatures. Suggestions that the ministry might reconsider Gringotts' charter. Political blackmail, Narcissa translated flatly. Harry's mind was spinning. The betrayal cut deeper than he could have imagined. Dumbledore, the man he'd trusted above all others, the wizard who had seemed to care for him, guide him, protect him, had been stealing from him all along. Using his family's money for, what? Personal gain. The greater good, he kept mentioning. Why now? Harry asked suddenly, looking up at Narcissa Malfoy. Why are you the one bringing this to light? Why would you care? The room fell silent. Narcissa regarded Harry for a long moment, something flickering in her eyes that he couldn't quite identify. Contrary to what you might believe, Mr. Potter, not all of my husband's associates share his enthusiasm for the Dark Lord's return. Some of us remember the last war all too well. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When certain information came to my attention regarding your accounts, I felt compelled to act. Information from where? Dumbledore asked sharply. Narcissa's smile was cold. I have my sources, Albus. The better question is why you believe you had the right to appropriate the Potter fortune for your own uses. Not for my own uses, Dumbledore insisted, some of his usual authority returning to his voice. Harry, you must understand. In the fight against Voldemort, resources are essential. Your parents would have wanted, don't. Harry's voice shook with suppressed rage. Don't tell me what my parents would have wanted. You didn't know them that well. Actually, Mr. Potter, Narcissa said softly, that's not entirely true. She reached into her robes and withdrew a sealed envelope, aged and slightly yellowed. This is why I became involved. This letter came into my possession recently, a letter written by your mother shortly before her death. Harry stared at the envelope in her hand as though it might burst into flames. A letter? From my mother? To you? Narcissa nodded. Lily Evans Potter and I were not friends at Hogwarts, we moved in very different circles. But after graduation, circumstances brought us into contact. We developed, not a friendship, exactly, but a mutual respect. This letter was meant to be delivered to me in the event of her death, with specific instructions. She held it out to Harry. I believe you should read it first. With trembling fingers, Harry took the envelope. His mother's handwriting, adorned the front, to Narcissa Black Malfoy. To be opened only in the event of my death. He broke the seal carefully, aware of everyone watching him. Inside was a single sheet of parchment covered in flowing script. Harry began to read, his heart hammering in his chest. Narcissa, if you're reading this, then James and I are dead, and the Fidelius charm has failed us. I pray that Harry has survived. If he has, I must ask of you the favor we discussed during our last meeting. Albus Dumbledore is not what he seems. I have discovered disturbing information about his plans for our son, plans involving prophecies, sacrifices, and a disregard for human life that chills me to the bone. James and I have taken precautions, including the establishment of secondary vaults unknown to Dumbledore, but I fear it won't be enough. I know what I ask is dangerous for you, especially given Lucius's allegiances, but you are the only one with the necessary knowledge and position to help. Watch over Harry from a distance. Ensure that the provisions James and I made for him are honored. And when the time is right, when Harry is old enough to understand, tell him the truth about Dumbledore. The evidence you'll need is in a sealed compartment within the Potter family vault, accessible only to a Potter by blood or someone bearing this letter, which is charmed with my magical signature. The goblins will recognize it. I know our worlds and beliefs differ greatly, but I have seen the love you bear your son. It is that love to which I appeal now. Protect mine as you would your own. With gratitude and hope, Lily Evans Potter P.S. The phoenix burns, but who tends the ashes? Harry read the letter twice, his hands shaking so badly the second time that the parchment rattled. He looked up at Narcissa Malfoy with new eyes, seeing for the first time the complexity behind her aristocratic facade. "This is genuine?" he asked hoarsely. "Director Ragnarok can confirm the magical signature," Narcissa replied. "It is indeed from Lily Potter." The Goblin director nodded. "We have verified the authenticity. This letter bears the magical signature of Lily Evans Potter and has not been tampered with in any way." Harry turned to Dumbledore, who was watching him with an inscrutable expression. "What did she mean?" Harry demanded. "What plans? What prophecies and sacrifices?" Dumbledore sighed deeply. "Harry, you are too young to understand the complexities of, I'm old enough to face Voldemort." Harry shouted, rising from his chair. "I'm old enough to watch Cedric die. I'm old enough to be called a liar by the entire wizarding world. But I'm not old enough to know what you've been planning for me since before I was born." The portraits of former headmasters along the walls had abandoned any pretense of sleep now. They watched the confrontation with undisguised interest, some even leaning forward in their frames. "Albus," McGonagall said quietly, "I think it's time for the truth." "All of it." Dumbledore looked suddenly every one of his considerable years. "The truth," he murmured. As if such a thing could be contained in mere words. He removed his spectacles and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Very well. What do you wish to know first, Harry?" "The evidence my mother mentioned," Harry replied immediately. "What did the goblins find in that sealed compartment?" Director Ragnarok produced another portfolio, this one bound in red leather. "We accessed the compartment using Mrs. Potter's letter as directed. Inside, we found extensive documentation of unauthorized withdrawals from the Potter accounts dating back to November 1981. Mrs. Potter had apparently been monitoring discrepancies and investigating them in secret. But that's not all," Narcissa added. "Tell him what else was there." The goblin's expression grew even grimmer. "We also found records of illegal blood wards established at your residence in Surrey, Mr. Potter, wards that drew on your own magic to sustain themselves, rather than being powered externally as is proper. The drain on your magical core has been substantial." Harry felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. "What does that mean?" "It means," McGonagall said, her voice shaking with barely suppressed fury, "that Albus has been suppressing your magical development since infancy. Those wards should have been maintained by the caster, not by drawing on your own innate power." She turned to Dumbledore, her normally composed features contorted with rage. "How could you? A child's magical core is sacred." Dumbledore met her gaze steadily. "The blood protection was essential, Minerva. It was the only way to ensure Voldemort couldn't touch him. And yet the Dark Lord used Potter's blood for his resurrection ritual," Narcissa observed coldly. "Rendering that protection useless while continuing to drain the boy's magic. Curious, that." A terrible suspicion began to form in Harry's mind. "You knew," he whispered, staring at Dumbledore. You knew the protection wouldn't work anymore after the graveyard, but you sent me back to the Dursleys anyway. Why? To keep you isolated, Narcissa suggested before Dumbledore could answer. To keep you dependent on him and his information. To maintain control. That is a cynical interpretation, Dumbledore replied, though his denial lacked conviction. What about the prophecy my mother mentioned? Harry pressed. Is that the same one Voldemort's after? The one in the Department of Mysteries? Dumbledore's head snapped up, his eyes sharp. How do you know about that? So there is a prophecy, Harry said, feeling a grim satisfaction at the confirmation. What does it say? A heavy silence filled the office. Even the goblins seemed to hold their breath, waiting for Dumbledore's response. I think, McGonagall said finally, that Mr. Potter has the right to know something that concerns him so directly. Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly. The prophecy, he said slowly, states that a child born at the end of July, to parents who had thrice defied Voldemort, would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. It says that Voldemort would mark this child as his equal, and that neither can live while the other survives. Harry unconsciously touched his scar. And that's me, he said flatly. That's why he came after my parents. Why he keeps trying to kill me. Yes. And you've known this all along. Since before I was born. I have. Harry felt a surge of anger so powerful it made the instruments on Dumbledore's shelves rattle. So everything, has been about this prophecy. About preparing me to face Voldemort. That's why you left me with the Dursleys. Why you've tested me year after year with the stone, the basilisk, the tournament. It was all just preparation for some final confrontation. Dumbledore's silence was damning. And my money? Harry continued, his voice rising. What was that for? Funding this grand plan of yours? Paying people to look the other way? Some of the funds were used for your protection, Dumbledore admitted. The Order requires resources. But I won't pretend there weren't other uses. Such as regular payments to Vernon and Petunia Dursley, Narcissa interjected, pointing to a particular document. £10,000 annually, money they clearly didn't spend on Mr. Potter's welfare, judging by his appearance when he arrives at Hogwarts each year. Harry felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. You paid them? To take me in? It was necessary to ensure their cooperation, Dumbledore explained. Cooperation? Harry's laugh was hollow. Is that what you call locking me in a cupboard for 10 years? Starving me? Treating me like a house elf? McGonagall's face had gone from white to a dangerous red. Albus, you swore to me they were taking good care of him. They kept him alive and under the blood wards, Dumbledore replied. That was what mattered most. What mattered most, Harry said, his voice deathly quiet, was your plan. Your greater good. Not me. Never me. The accusation hung in the air like a curse. Dumbledore didn't deny it. There's something else, Narcissa said softly. She turned to the goblins. Show him the will. Director Ragnarok produced another document from his portfolio, thicker than the others, sealed with multiple wax stamps bearing the Potter crest. The last will and testament of James and Lily Potter, the goblin announced. Sealed by Albus Dumbledore as Chief Warlock on November 2, 1981, and never executed. Never executed? McGonagall repeated, aghast. But that's illegal. The Potter will should have been read immediately following their deaths. Indeed it should have, Ragnarok agreed grimly. Yet it was sealed by order of the Chief Warlock, who claimed it was for Mr. Potter's protection. All eyes turned to Dumbledore, who had the grace to look ashamed. There were complications. Provisions that would have made Harry's placement with his Muggle relatives impossible. Such as the list of potential guardians named by James and Lily, Narcissa suggested. A list that did not include Petunia and Vernon Dursley. In fact, if I recall correctly, it explicitly stated that under no circumstances was Harry to be placed with Lily's sister. Harry felt as though the world was tilting beneath him. "Let me see it," he demanded. Director Ragnarok broke the seals with a sharp claw and unrolled the parchment. Harry leaned forward eagerly, hungry for this connection to his parents, their final wishes, written in their own hands. The will was complex, with numerous provisions for various scenarios, but certain sections stood out starkly. "In the event of our deaths, custody of our son, Harry James Potter, is to be granted in the following order of priority. 1. Sirius Oran Black, Harry's godfather by ritual and by oath. 2. Alice and Frank Longbottom. 3. Minerva McGonagall. 4. Andromeda and Ted Tonks. Under no circumstances is our son to be placed with Petunia and Vernon Dursley. Petunia's hatred of magic and Vernon's violent temperament make them utterly unsuitable guardians for a magical child. Furthermore, we hereby appoint the Goblin Nation, specifically Gringotts Bank, as the financial trustees of the Potter estate until Harry comes of age. No withdrawals exceeding 1,000 galleons annually may be made by any guardian without the approval of at least 2 of the following: Sirius Black, Minerva McGonagall, or Amelia Bones." Harry looked up from the will, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "You ignored their wishes," he said to Dumbledore. "You sealed their will, threw Sirius in Azkaban without a trial, and left me with the Dursleys, all so you could control me and my money." "It wasn't about the money, Harry," Dumbledore insisted. "It was about keeping you safe and preparing you for what's to come." "And what exactly is coming, Albus?" McGonagall demanded. "What fate have you been preparing this boy for?" Dumbledore hesitated, his eyes moving between the assembled faces. "Voldemort created objects called Horcruxes, vessels containing pieces of his soul. As long as these Horcruxes exist, he cannot truly die." "We are aware of what Horcruxes are," Narcissa said coldly. "What does this have to do with Mr. Potter?" Dumbledore's gaze dropped to Harry's scar. "On the night Voldemort attacked Godric's Hollow, when the killing curse rebounded, a fragment of his soul attached itself to the only living thing it could find." The implication hung in the air, terrible and undeniable. "Me," Harry whispered. "I'm a Horcrux." "You contain a Horcrux," Dumbledore corrected gently. "There is a distinction." "A distinction without a difference," Narcissa retorted. "You've been raising him like a pig for slaughter, haven't you? Keeping him alive until the right moment when he must die to destroy the Dark Lord's soul fragment." The office erupted into chaos. McGonagall was shouting at Dumbledore, the goblins were muttering furiously among themselves, and the portraits were calling out questions and exclamations. Through it all, Harry sat motionless, the truth crashing over him in terrible waves. He had to die. That had been the plan all along. Silence. Ragnarok's voice cut through the tumult, surprisingly powerful for his small stature. "This changes matters significantly. Mr. Potter's status as an unwilling Horcrux host triggers ancient goblin treaties concerning soul magic." He turned to Harry, his expression grave but not unkind. "Mr. Potter, Gringotts offers its services in removing the soul fragment without harm to you." Harry stared at him. "That's possible." "Quite possible," the goblin affirmed. "The procedure is complex and not without discomfort, but the Goblin Nation has been dealing with soul magic since before wizards built their first permanent settlements. We have ways of separating a Horcrux from its host without killing either." "And you never thought to consult them?" McGonagall asked Dumbledore incredulously. "You simply decided Harry must die." "The goblin methods are not widely known," Dumbledore replied defensively. "And they come at a significant cost." "A cost the Potter vaults could easily have covered," Ragnarok pointed out, "had they not been systematically depleted." Harry looked from the goblins to Narcissa Malfoy, his mind struggling to process everything. "Why are you helping me?" he asked her. "Your husband is a Death Eater. Your son hates me. Why would you expose all this?" Narcissa considered him thoughtfully. "Mr. Potter, the wizarding world is not as simple as light and dark, good and evil. My husband made choices for our family's survival that I did not always agree with. As for Draco, she sighed. Children often parrot their parents' views without understanding them. But I made a promise to your mother, a promise between mothers, and I intend to honor it. She paused, then added more softly, and I have no desire to see the Dark Lord return to power. The last war cost my family dearly, despite what you may believe about our loyalties. I lost a sister to madness and another to estrangement. I watched friends become monsters. I do not wish to live through that again. Her words rang with sincerity, and Harry found himself believing her. The realization was disorienting, a Malfoy standing up for him while Dumbledore, his supposed protector, had been plotting his death. What happens now? Harry asked, looking around at the strange assembly. Now, Director Ragnarok said firmly, we address the legal matters. Headmaster Dumbledore's actions constitute theft, fraud, child endangerment, and illegal binding of a magical child. Under both wizarding and goblin law, these are serious offenses. You can't seriously be considering pressing charges, Dumbledore said, though his tone suggested he knew exactly how precarious his position was. That will be Mr. Potter's decision, Narcissa replied. Though I imagine the Goblin Nation has its own grievances to address. Ragnarok nodded grimly. Indeed we do. Gringotts takes a very dim view of those who abuse their positions to manipulate our banking systems. At minimum, Headmaster Dumbledore, your accounts will be frozen pending investigation, and you will be required to make full restitution to the Potter estate. And what of Mr. Potter's condition? McGonagall asked, gesturing toward Harry's scar. As I said, we can remove the soul fragment safely, Ragnarok assured her. The procedure would need to be performed at Gringotts, using our ancient ritual chambers. It would require Mr. Potter to remain in Goblin territory for approximately 3 days. And afterward? Harry asked. What then? Afterward, Narcissa said, you would be free to make your own choices, Mr. Potter. Perhaps for the first time in your life. The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. Harry had spent so long following Dumbledore's lead, trusting in his guidance, that the prospect of charting his own course was daunting. And yet. I want to do it, he said firmly. I want the Horcrux gone. And then I want to know everything about my family, my inheritance, all of it. Harry, Dumbledore began, please consider, I think you've lost the right to advise Mr. Potter, Albus, McGonagall interrupted coldly. She turned to Harry, her expression softening. I will accompany you to Gringotts, Potter, if you wish. As your head of house and as someone named in your parents' will, I feel responsible for your welfare. Harry felt a rush of gratitude toward the stern professor. Thank you, he said. I'd like that. Narcissa inclined her head slightly. I will make myself available as well, should you have questions about your mother's letter or other matters we've discussed today. My husband need not be involved. What about Sirius? Harry asked suddenly. He's still a wanted man. How can he claim guardianship if the ministry is hunting him? That is another matter we must address, Ragnarok said. The execution of your parents would necessitate a review of Sirius Black's case. If, as many suspect, he was imprisoned without trial, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement would be compelled to investigate. Amelia Bones is fair, McGonagall noted. If presented with evidence of Sirius's innocence, she would follow the law, regardless of what Fudge or his cronies might want. Harry's mind was spinning with possibilities. Freedom from the Horcrux. Sirius's name cleared. Justice for his parents' wishes. Accountability for Dumbledore's actions. It was almost too much to process. Perhaps, Dumbledore said quietly, we should continue this discussion when tempers have cooled. These are complex matters that require careful consideration. No, Harry said firmly, surprising himself with his own conviction. No more delays. No more secrets. We do this now. He turned to Ragnarok. How soon can the procedure be arranged? The goblin looked pleased at Harry's decisiveness. We can prepare the ritual chamber by tomorrow evening. You would need to arrive at Gringotts by sunset. That's settled then, Harry said, standing up. He felt lighter somehow, despite the weight of everything he'd learned. For the first time, he was taking control of his own destiny. Professor McGonagall, will you help me gather what I'll need? Of course, Potter, she replied, casting a disappointed look at Dumbledore. We'll leave immediately. As they turned to go, Dumbledore rose from his chair. Harry, please. You don't understand the risks. Voldemort will still be out there, Harry finished for him. And I'll still have to face him eventually. But I'll do it on my terms, not yours. Not as a sacrifice, but as a person. Narcissa Malfoy's lips curved in a small smile of approval. Well said, Mr. Potter. She gathered her cloak around her shoulders. Director Ragnarok, shall we finalize the arrangements? The goblin nodded. Indeed, Mrs. Malfoy. Mr. Potter, we will expect you at Gringotts tomorrow evening. Bring only what you would need for a 3-day stay. The rest will be provided. As Harry left Dumbledore's office, flanked by Professor McGonagall and followed by Narcissa Malfoy and the Goblin delegation, he felt as though he were walking away from one life and toward another. The corridor ahead seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. Behind him, Albus Dumbledore sat alone in his office, surrounded by the trappings of power that now felt hollow. For the first time in many years, the great chess master found himself without a move to play. News spread through Hogwarts like fiendfire. By dinner time, the entire school knew that something momentous had happened involving Harry Potter, Narcissa Malfoy, and a delegation of goblins from Gringotts. The details varied wildly depending on who was telling the story, but all versions agreed on one thing: Dumbledore was in serious trouble. Harry sat in the Gryffindor common room, explaining everything to Ron and Hermione in hushed tones. Their reactions were exactly as he'd expected. Hermione was horrified by the legal and ethical violations, while Ron was stuck on the revelation about Harry's wealth. Bloody hell, Harry, Ron whispered. You're not just rich, you're Malfoy rich. Maybe richer. That's what you're focusing on. Hermione hissed. Not the fact that Dumbledore has been stealing from him. Or that he was planning for Harry to die. Ron had the grace to look sheepish. Sorry. It's a lot to take in. Tell me about it, Harry muttered. He was still processing everything himself. I just can't believe Dumbledore would do this, Hermione said, shaking her head. He's always seemed so good. Appearances can be deceiving, came a voice from the portrait hole. They turned to see Professor McGonagall entering the common room, a rare occurrence that immediately silenced all other conversations. She approached their corner, her expression grave. Potter, I've made the necessary arrangements. We'll depart for Gringotts tomorrow at 4 o'clock. That should give us plenty of time to arrive before sunset. She paused, glancing at Ron and Hermione. I assume you've informed Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger of the situation? Harry nodded. Yes, Professor. They know everything. McGonagall pursed her lips. I expected as much. Well, they should be prepared for your absence. The procedure will take 3 days, during which you'll be unreachable. What about classes? Hermione asked automatically. Mr. Potter will be excused, of course, McGonagall replied. I've already informed the other professors. She hesitated, then added, the headmaster has been temporarily relieved of his duties pending investigation. Professor Flitwick will be serving as acting headmaster in the interim. The common room erupted into whispers at this announcement. Dumbledore suspended? It was unprecedented. What about the Dursleys? Harry asked. Will I have to go back there? McGonagall's expression softened slightly. No, Potter. Once your parents' will is properly executed, you'll be placed with your rightful guardian. If Mr. Black's name can be cleared quickly, that would be him. If not, temporary arrangements will be made until his situation is resolved. Relief flooded through Harry. Never going back to Privet Drive, it was almost too good to believe. Professor, Hermione began hesitantly, about the Horcrux, is Harry going to be all right? McGonagall glanced around the common room, evidently deciding this wasn't the place for such a discussion. Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley, perhaps you would accompany us to my office? We can speak more freely there. They followed McGonagall through the portrait hole and down the corridor to her office. Unlike Dumbledore's eclectic collection of silver instruments and exotic artifacts, McGonagall's office was practical and orderly, books arranged by subject, papers neatly stacked, a tea service ready on a side table. She gestured for them to sit and poured tea for each of them. Now then, she said once they were settled, about the Horcrux. Director Ragnarok assures me that the Goblin procedure is safe and effective. It has been performed successfully many times over the centuries. But it's dark magic, isn't it? Hermione asked. I've read about Horcruxes, or at least references to them. The books always said they're among the darkest magic possible. Creating a Horcrux is indeed dark magic of the vilest sort, McGonagall agreed. But removing one is an act of healing. The Goblins specialize in such procedures, particularly when valuable artifacts have been corrupted by dark magic. And I'm just another valuable artifact, Harry said bitterly. McGonagall fixed him with a stern look. You are nothing of the sort, Potter. You are a young wizard who has been grievously wronged, and we are going to put it right. She set down her teacup with a decisive click. Which brings me to another matter. The Goblins believe there may be additional Horcruxes. Ron frowned. Additional? You mean you know who made more than one? It would explain his level of physical deterioration when I saw him in the graveyard, Harry said slowly. And why he didn't die when the killing curse rebounded. McGonagall nodded grimly. Exactly. Director Ragnarok believes they may be able to use the fragment in your scar to locate the others, once it's safely contained. That's brilliant, Hermione breathed. If they can find and destroy all the Horcruxes, then Voldemort would be mortal again. Precisely, Miss Granger. The Goblins have a vested interest in seeing the Dark Lord defeated. Their relationship with the wizarding world may be complex, but they have no desire to live under his rule. Harry thought about this. So that's why Dumbledore never went to them for help. Because he wanted to control how and when the Horcruxes were found and destroyed. I believe so, McGonagall said, her voice tight with disapproval. Albus has always preferred to work alone, to keep his plans close. It's a tendency that has served him well in many instances, but in this case. She shook her head. His secretiveness may have cost us dearly. What about Mrs. Malfoy? Ron asked suspiciously. Can we really trust her? Her husband's a Death Eater. An excellent question, Mr. Weasley, McGonagall acknowledged. Narcissa Malfoy's involvement is unexpected. However, the letter from Lily Potter appears genuine, and Mrs. Malfoy's actions thus far have been solely in Mr. Potter's interest. My mum trusted her, Harry said quietly. That counts for something. Indeed it does, McGonagall agreed. And while I would never have imagined an alliance with the Malfoy family, these extraordinary circumstances may require extraordinary partnerships. She looked directly at Harry. That said, Potter, I would advise caution. Trust, but verify. Harry nodded. I understand, Professor. Good, McGonagall said briskly. Now, you should all get some rest. Tomorrow will be a significant day. She rose, indicating that their meeting was over. Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, I trust you'll keep what you've learned to yourselves. Of course, Professor, Hermione assured her quickly. Yeah, our lips are sealed, Ron added. As they walked back to Gryffindor Tower, Harry felt a strange mix of emotions, anger at Dumbledore's betrayal, relief that he wouldn't have to die to defeat Voldemort, uncertainty about what the future held. But beneath it all was a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Whatever came next, he wouldn't be facing it as Dumbledore's pawn. For the first time, he would be making his own choices, forging his own path. And somehow, despite everything, that felt like freedom. The next day passed in a blur of preparations and whispered conversations. News of Dumbledore's suspension had reached the Daily Prophet, though the details remained vague, something about financial irregularities and an ongoing investigation by Gringotts. The student body was abuzz with speculation, and Harry found himself the center of attention once again, though for once not because of anything he'd done. By 4 o'clock, Harry was waiting in McGonagall's office with his overnight bag, saying goodbye to Ron and Hermione. "Be careful, mate," Ron said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Don't let those goblins do anything weird to you." "Ronald!" Hermione scolded, before turning to Harry with worried eyes. "Write to us as soon as you can. Let us know you're all right." "I will," Harry promised. "Keep an eye on things here, will you? And watch out for Umbridge, she's bound to try something with Dumbledore gone." "Don't worry about that," McGonagall said as she entered, fastening a traveling cloak around her shoulders. "Professor Flitwick has the situation well in hand. And Madame Bones will be visiting the school tomorrow to begin an official investigation." "Madame Bones? Susan's aunt?" Harry asked, remembering the stern witch from his hearing at the ministry. "Indeed. She's the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and, unlike many at the ministry these days, is immune to both bribes and intimidation." McGonagall checked the time. "We should be going, Potter. Mrs. Malfoy is meeting us at the gates." With final goodbyes to his friends, Harry followed McGonagall out of the castle and down the sloping lawn toward the entrance gates. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grounds, and the air had the crisp, clean smell of approaching winter. As they neared the gates, Harry spotted a slender figure waiting on the other side, Narcissa Malfoy, still in her elegant blue robes from the day before, though she had added a silver-trimmed cloak against the chill. "Professor McGonagall, Mr. Potter," she greeted them with a slight inclination of her head. "You're precisely on time." "Mrs. Malfoy," McGonagall replied coolly. "I trust the arrangements are in place." "Of course. Director Ragnarok has prepared everything." Narcissa withdrew a slender silver object from her cloak, a portkey in the shape of a miniature sword. "This will take us directly to Gringotts' private reception area. Shall we?" McGonagall opened the gates with a wave of her wand, and she and Harry stepped through. The three of them formed a small circle, each placing a finger on the silver sword. "On 3, Narcissa said. 1, 2, 3. Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel and the world dissolved into a blur of color and wind. When his feet touched solid ground again, they were standing in a marble chamber he'd never seen before, clearly part of Gringotts, judging by the architecture, but far more luxurious than the public areas of the bank. The walls were lined with gleaming white marble veined with gold, and intricate carvings of battle scenes and financial transactions covered every surface. Chandeliers of crystal and gold hung from the high ceiling, casting warm light over the reception area. Director Ragnarok stood waiting for them, flanked by 2 goblin guards in ceremonial armor. "Welcome to the ancestral halls," he greeted them. "Few wizards are permitted entry to this part of Gringotts." "We appreciate the honor," McGonagall replied formally. "And the assistance you're providing, Mr. Potter." "The honor is ours," Ragnarok said, surprising Harry with his sincerity. "The Potter family has always maintained favorable relations with the Goblin nation. It is time we repaid that respect." He turned to Harry. "Mr. Potter, before we proceed with the ritual preparations, there are several legal matters to address. If you'll follow me." They were led deeper into the bank, through corridors of increasing grandeur, until they reached a set of golden doors inscribed with runes. Ragnarok pressed his palm against the center of the doors, which swung open silently to reveal a circular chamber dominated by a massive round table of polished obsidian. Seated at the table were several goblins in formal attire, along with two familiar faces, Amelia Bones and, to Harry's astonishment, Remus Lupin. "Harry!" Lupin exclaimed, rising to greet him with a warm embrace. "Thank Merlin you're all right. Professor Lupin. What are you doing here?" Harry asked, genuinely pleased to see his former teacher. "Remus is here as a representative of Sirius Black," Madame Bones explained, her monocle glinting in the lamplight. "And I'm here in my capacity as head of the DMLE. What we're about to discuss has significant legal implications. Please, be seated," Ragnarok invited, gesturing to the empty chairs around the table. Once they were all settled, a goblin scribe unrolled a lengthy parchment and began to read, "This emergency session of the Inheritance Council is called to address the following matters: the unsealing and execution of the last will and testament of James and Lily Potter, the financial restitution owed to the Potter estate by Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, the legal guardianship of Harry James Potter, and the case of Sirius Orion Black." Harry listened in astonishment as the proceedings unfolded. The goblins had moved with remarkable speed, compiling evidence and preparing legal documents in less than 24 hours. It seemed that once Narcissa had brought Lily's letter to their attention, they had launched a full investigation into the handling of the Potter estate. The amount misappropriated from the Potter vaults totals 17,642,913 galleons, 14 sickles, and 3 nuts, one goblin reported, consulting a ledger. This includes unauthorized withdrawals, investment income diverted, and properties sold without proper authorization. Harry's jaw dropped. 17 million galleons. He'd had no idea his family was so wealthy. No wonder Dumbledore had gone to such lengths to control his inheritance. "All of Dumbledore's personal assets have been frozen," the goblin continued. "However, they amount to only approximately 3 million galleons. The remainder of the restitution will need to be negotiated." "What about the recipients of these funds?" Madame Bones asked sharply. "There must be a paper trail." "Indeed there is," Ragnarok confirmed. "Significant sums were transferred to accounts belonging to various members of the Order of the Phoenix, as well as to Vernon and Petunia Dursley, as previously noted. Additionally, regular payments were made to Molly and Arthur Weasley." Harry felt as though he'd been doused with ice water. "The Weasleys?" he whispered, looking at McGonagall in shock. "They were being paid? To what? Be my friends? Take me in during summers?" McGonagall looked equally disturbed. "I cannot believe Arthur and Molly would accept payments to care for a child they clearly love." "The transfers were disguised as ministry stipends for Arthur's department," Ragnarok explained. "It's possible they were unaware of the true source." Harry desperately wanted to believe that. The thought that the Weasleys, the family he'd come to see as his own, might have been taking money from Dumbledore all along was too painful to contemplate. "We will investigate all recipients," Madame Bones assured him. "Those who knowingly participated in the fraud will face charges." The meeting continued, covering the various properties and investments that made up the Potter estate, far more extensive than Harry had ever imagined. There were homes in several countries, shares in businesses both magical and muggle, and collections of rare magical artifacts and books. "All of this will be properly inventoried and restored to your control," Ragnarok told Harry. "Though until you come of age, your financial guardian will oversee major decisions." "Which brings us to the matter of guardianship," Madame Bones said. "According to the Potter's will, Sirius Black should be your guardian. However, his current legal status complicates matters. I've brought the case files," she continued, tapping a thick folder on the table. "Having reviewed the evidence, or rather, the lack thereof, I'm appalled to report that Sirius Black never received a trial. He was sent directly to Azkaban on Barty Crouch Sr.'s orders, with Albus Dumbledore's tacit approval." Lupin made a strangled sound. "We suspected as much, but to have it confirmed." "I've already issued an order for a full investigation and an immediate hearing," Madame Bones said grimly. "In the meantime, we need to establish temporary guardianship for Mr. Potter." "The will names me as third in line," McGonagall noted, after Sirius Black and the Longbottoms. Indeed, Madame Bones agreed. Are you willing to assume guardianship, Minerva? It would be temporary, until Black's situation is resolved. McGonagall nodded firmly. I am. I have no objections, Harry said quickly. The thought of having Professor McGonagall as his guardian was far preferable to returning to the Dursleys. The legal proceedings continued for another hour, with documents signed, oaths taken, and arrangements made for the management of Harry's restored inheritance. Through it all, Harry felt as though he were watching from a distance, unable to fully comprehend how dramatically his life was changing. Finally, Ragnarok rolled up the last scroll and stood. The legal matters are now in order. It is time to prepare for the ritual, Mr. Potter. If you would come with me. Harry rose, suddenly nervous about what was to come. Can Professor McGonagall come too? For the preparations, yes, Ragnarok agreed. Though the ritual itself must be performed by goblins alone. Harry turned to Narcissa, who had been surprisingly quiet throughout the proceedings. Thank you, he said simply. For bringing my mother's letter forward. For helping me. Narcissa inclined her head slightly. I made a promise, Mr. Potter. I keep my promises. She rose gracefully. I will await word of your successful procedure. We have much to discuss afterward, regarding the other matters mentioned in your mother's letter. As Harry followed Ragnarok and McGonagall out of the chamber, he couldn't help but feel that he was walking toward a new chapter in his life, one where he wasn't just the boy who lived or Dumbledore's weapon, but simply Harry Potter, a young wizard with choices of his own. Behind them, Lupin and Madame Bones remained at the table, deep in discussion about Sirius's case and the evidence against Dumbledore. Narcissa Malfoy watched them go, her expression thoughtful. The wheels she had set in motion were turning faster than even she had anticipated. The wizarding world was about to change irrevocably, and she had positioned herself and her family at the center of that change. As the golden doors closed behind Harry, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Lily Evans Potter would have approved. Chapter 2, Revelations and Rebirth. The ritual chamber deep beneath Gringotts was nothing like Harry had imagined. Instead of the dark, foreboding space he had expected, the circular room glowed with a soft, amber light emanating from polished stones embedded in the walls. The air carried a subtle scent of herbs and metals, earthy and ancient. At the center stood a raised dais of white marble, inscribed with runes that pulsed with gentle luminescence. Remove your outer clothing and lie there, Director Ragnarok instructed, pointing to the dais. You may keep your undergarments. Harry glanced nervously at Professor McGonagall, who tactfully turned her back. I'll wait outside during the procedure, she said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. But I'll be just beyond that door if you need anything afterward. As McGonagall left, 7 goblin healers entered wearing robes of deep crimson. Their expressions were solemn and focused. This ritual has been performed 23 times in goblin history, Ragnarok explained as Harry removed his robes and shoes. In each case, the host survived while the soul fragment was extracted and contained. Will it hurt? Harry asked, climbing onto the cold marble. Ragnarok considered him with dark, intelligent eyes. Yes, he answered honestly. But not beyond your endurance. And the pain will end with the ritual. Harry nodded, appreciating the directness. After a lifetime of half-truths and manipulations, straightforward honesty felt refreshing, even when the news wasn't good. We will begin now, Ragnarok said. Try to remain still, but do not fight your body's natural responses. The ritual works better if you allow the magic to flow through you rather than resisting it. The goblin healers positioned themselves in a circle around the dais, each holding a different ritual implement, a silver bowl, a crystal wand, a bronze dagger, a golden bell, a jade cup, an obsidian mirror, and a platinum scale. Ragnarok stood at Harry's head, producing a small vial of luminous blue liquid. Open your mouth, he instructed. When Harry complied, the goblin placed 3 drops of the potion on his tongue. The effect was immediate. Warmth spread through Harry's body, followed by a tingling sensation that made his fingers and toes twitch. His scar began to prickle uncomfortably. The potion separates foreign magic from your own, Ragnarok explained, stepping back to join the circle. Now we begin. The goblins started chanting in their native language, a rhythmic, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the stone beneath Harry. The runes around him brightened in response, shifting from amber to gold to white-hot blue. Harry's scar erupted in pain. He gasped, his back arching involuntarily off the dais. It felt as though someone were driving a heated needle into his forehead, probing deeper and deeper until it touched something fundamentally wrong. Through watering eyes, Harry saw tendrils of black smoke beginning to seep from his scar, coiling in the air above him like a malevolent serpent. The goblin with the crystal wand stepped forward, tracing intricate patterns that seemed to contain and direct the smoke. The pain intensified. Harry bit his lip to keep from screaming, tasting blood. His entire body trembled with the effort to remain still as the foreign presence within him fought against extraction. Then, suddenly, he felt it, the distinct sensation of two separate consciousnesses where there should have been only one. The fragment of Voldemort, forced into awareness by the ritual, lashed out in fury and terror. "Let me in." A high, cold voice hissed inside his mind. "We are bound, Potter. I am your destiny, your purpose." "No," Harry gasped aloud, startling the goblins. "You're nothing to me." The black smoke writhed more violently, trying to retreat back into Harry's scar. The goblin with the obsidian mirror moved quickly, positioning it above Harry's forehead. In its reflective surface, the smoke seemed to find itself trapped, a twisted, mutilated fragment of a human face glaring back with hatred. "Now!" Ragnarok commanded. The 7 goblins raised their implements simultaneously, their chanting reaching a crescendo. The goblin with the bronze dagger made a sharp cutting motion in the air above Harry's scar. Pain beyond anything Harry had ever experienced tore through him. His vision went white, then black. He felt as though his skull were being split open, his very essence torn apart. And then, abruptly, release. The black smoke separated completely from his body, forming a small, dense cloud that the goblin with the silver bowl quickly captured. The moment it was contained, Harry's pain vanished so completely it left him dizzy with relief. He lay panting on the dais, sweat soaking his body, as the goblins continued a softer chant. The rune light dimmed gradually, returning to its original amber glow. "It is done," Ragnarok announced. "The soul fragment has been extracted and contained." Harry struggled to sit up, his limbs shaky but responding. "That's it. It's gone. See for yourself," the goblin with the mirror said, holding it up to Harry's face. In the obsidian surface, Harry saw himself, pale and exhausted, but transformed. His scar, which had always been livid and raised against his skin, was now merely a thin, silvery line, like any ordinary old scar. But more striking was his eyes. They seemed brighter somehow, more alive, as though a film had been removed from them. "You have carried a darkness not your own for too long, Harry Potter," Ragnarok said, using Harry's first name for the first time. "Now you are truly yourself." Tears pricked at Harry's eyes, tears of relief, of release, of a burden lifted that he hadn't fully understood until this moment. "Thank you," he whispered. The goblin with the silver bowl stepped forward, showing Harry its contents. The black smoke had condensed into a small, quivering mass no larger than a snitch, trapped beneath a dome of shimmering magic. "What will you do with it?" Harry asked. "Study it first," Ragnarok replied. "It may lead us to the other fragments. Then destroy it, as we have done with such abominations before." A goblin healer approached with a steaming goblet. "Drink this. It will restore your energy and help your magic adjust to the absence of the parasite." The potion tasted of honey and herbs with a metallic undertone. As it spread through him, Harry felt strength returning to his limbs. The hollow sensation where the Horcrux had been began to fill with his own magic, expanding to reclaim the space that had been usurped for so long. Rest now, Ragnarok instructed. The next phase of healing requires sleep. Your guardian will be informed that the procedure was successful. As the goblins helped him to a small adjoining chamber furnished with a comfortable bed, Harry realized he felt lighter than he could ever remember feeling. Not just physically, but in his mind and soul. For the first time in his life, he was truly, completely alone in his own head. It was the most wonderful feeling in the world. While Harry underwent the ritual at Gringotts, Hogwarts was in turmoil. The sudden suspension of Albus Dumbledore and the installation of Professor Flitwick as acting headmaster had sent shockwaves through the student body. The staff table in the Great Hall that evening was noticeably tense, with several empty seats, McGonagall absent with Harry, and Dumbledore conspicuously missing from his central throne-like chair. Dolores Umbridge, however, looked positively gleeful. As senior undersecretary to the Minister and High Inquisitor, she simpered during dinner announcements, "I will be working closely with Professor Flitwick to ensure ministry standards are maintained during this unfortunate transition period." Flitwick, standing on his chair to be seen, gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, Dolores. Though I should note that Hogwarts remains independent of ministry control, as per its charter. Now, students, please enjoy your meal." At the Gryffindor table, Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances. "She looks like she's just been handed a Christmas present," Ron muttered, watching Umbridge's self-satisfied smile. "This can't be good." "Professor Flitwick won't let her take over," Hermione whispered back. "He may be small, but he's a former dueling champion. And he's smarter than he lets on." Still, with Dumbledore gone and McGonagall away with Harry. Ron shook his head. The timing couldn't be worse. Further down the table, Ginny leaned across to them. "Is it true? About Harry and the goblins?" "We can't talk about it here," Hermione said quickly, noticing several students leaning in to listen. Later, in the common room. The meal passed with an undercurrent of tension and whispered speculation. When the Gryffindors finally returned to their tower, they found Professor Flitwick waiting for them, his diminutive form standing on the hearth to address the whole house. "Good evening," he squeaked. "I wanted to speak with you directly, as Gryffindor's head of house is temporarily away on important business with Mr. Potter." The common room fell silent, everyone straining to hear what the tiny professor would say. "First, let me assure you that Hogwarts remains a safe and stable learning environment. The changes in administration are temporary while certain irregularities are investigated." Flitwick chose his words carefully. "Professor McGonagall asked me to inform you that she and Mr. Potter will return in 3 days' time. Until then, I will be serving as your acting head of house as well as acting headmaster." "Professor," called Seamus Finnegan, "is it true Dumbledore's been stealing money?" Flitwick's expression grew serious. "It would be inappropriate for me to comment on ongoing investigations, Mr. Finnegan. However, I can say that Gringotts does not take financial improprieties lightly. And Harry's involved because..." Dean Thomas prompted. "That is Mr. Potter's private business," Flitwick said firmly. "If he chooses to share details upon his return, that is his prerogative. Until then, I expect all of you to focus on your studies and refrain from harmful speculation." His sharp gaze swept the room. "I should also warn you that Professor Umbridge may attempt to use this situation to advance her own agenda. Remember that Hogwarts has stood for 1,000 years through many challenges. We will weather this one as well." With a final nod, he hopped down and left through the portrait hole. The moment he was gone, the common room erupted into conversation. Everyone turned to Ron and Hermione, clearly expecting answers. "We can't tell you everything," Hermione said, raising her voice above the clamor. "It's not our story to tell. But yes, Dumbledore has been doing things he shouldn't have been doing, and yes, it involves Harry's family money. And Harry's gone to Gringotts with McGonagall to sort it out," Ron added. "That's all we can say right now." Most students seemed disappointed but accepted this limited information. As the crowd dispersed, Ginny, Neville, and the twins remained, gathering close around Ron and Hermione. "Okay, what's really going on?" Fred asked in a low voice. "Dad sent us an owl this morning telling us to prepare for difficult revelations and to stand by Harry no matter what comes to light." He sounded worried. Hermione bit her lip, then cast a quick Muffliato charm around their group. "What I'm about to tell you goes no further," she warned. "Harry would want you to know, but it needs to stay quiet until he returns." She and Ron took turns explaining the basics: Narcissa Malfoy's arrival with the Goblins, Dumbledore's theft from the Potter vaults, the suppressed will, and Harry's treatment at the Dursleys. They omitted the Horcrux, feeling that particular revelation should come from Harry himself. By the time they finished, the twins looked thunderstruck, Neville was pale with shock, and Ginny's eyes blazed with fury. "That absolute bastard," she hissed. "All these years pretending to be Harry's mentor, his protector. And Mum and Dad were getting money?" George asked, his normally cheerful face troubled. Ron nodded miserably. "They might not have known where it was coming from, though. It was disguised as ministry stipends." "That's not possible," Fred said firmly. "Dad's too honest. If he knew the money was really Harry's." "I know," Ron agreed. "That's what McGonagall said too. They're going to investigate everyone who received funds." Neville, who had been quiet throughout, finally spoke. "What about my parents? You said they were named in the Potter's will as potential guardians for Harry." Hermione nodded. "Yes, right after Sirius Black." "That makes sense," Neville said softly. "My mum was Harry's godmother. Our families were close." The others stared at him. "Neville!" Hermione exclaimed. "Why didn't you ever tell Harry this?" Neville looked confused. "I thought he knew. Gran always talked about how Lily and my mum were best friends, how they were pregnant at the same time and planned for us to grow up together." His eyes widened in realization. "You mean Harry doesn't know any of this?" "No," Ron said. "He knows almost nothing about his parents or their friends. Dumbledore kept all that from him." "But why?" Ginny asked. "What could Dumbledore possibly gain from keeping Harry ignorant about his own family?" "Control," Hermione answered grimly. "If Harry didn't know his place in the wizarding world, his history, his connections, his inheritance, then Dumbledore could shape him however he wanted." A troubled silence fell over the group as they contemplated the extent of Dumbledore's manipulation. Finally, Fred spoke up. "Whatever happens, we're with Harry," he said firmly. "The whole family will be." "Absolutely," George agreed. "Dumbledore might have fooled everyone, but Harry's never been anything but honest with us." Neville nodded. "I'll write to Gran tonight. She needs to know what's happening. She always said Dumbledore was too secretive about what really happened that night." As their conversation continued, none of them noticed Rita Skeeter in her beetle animagus form, perched on a nearby curtain, drinking in every word. Harry slept for 12 hours straight after the ritual, his body and magic recuperating from the strain of extracting the Horcrux. When he finally awoke in the small goblin chamber, he felt remarkably refreshed. His mind seemed clearer than it had ever been, his thoughts sharper and more focused. A goblin attendant brought him breakfast and fresh clothing, simple but well-made robes in deep green, embroidered with the Potter crest. Harry dressed quickly and was led to a conference room where Professor McGonagall and Director Ragnarok waited. "Potter," McGonagall greeted him, her stern features softening with relief. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I have in, maybe ever," Harry replied honestly. "It's like I've been wearing glasses with the wrong prescription my whole life, and suddenly everything's in focus." "That is a common reaction," Ragnarok said, nodding. "The parasite was draining your magic and interfering with your natural abilities. You may discover talents and aptitudes you never knew you possessed." "What happens next?" Harry asked, taking a seat at the table. "The soul fragment is already providing useful information," Ragnarok explained. Our specialists are using it to locate the other Horcruxes. We believe there are 5 more, plus the main soul piece residing in the reconstituted body. 6 pieces of his soul. McGonagall looked appalled. Is that even possible? It is unprecedented, the Goblin director acknowledged. No dark wizard in recorded history has created more than 3 Horcruxes. The instability of Voldemort's remaining soul must be extreme. So if we find and destroy the other 5. Harry began. Then he becomes mortal again, Ragnarok finished. Capable of being killed by conventional means. The implications were enormous. For the first time, Harry could see a path to defeating Voldemort that didn't require him to die or face impossible odds. While you were recovering, we received news from Hogwarts, McGonagall said, changing the subject. Professor Flitwick has things well in hand, but Dolores Umbridge is attempting to use the situation to expand her authority. Of course she is, Harry muttered. What about Dumbledore? Where is he? Under house arrest at his brother's home in Hogsmeade, McGonagall replied. Madame Bones has restricted his magic pending investigation. And Sirius? Harry asked eagerly. McGonagall's lips curved in a small smile. Mr. Lupin left for a secure location this morning with documents from Madame Bones. If all goes as planned, your godfather will receive an expedited hearing tomorrow morning. Hope surged through Harry. You mean he could be free? Officially cleared? It seems likely, McGonagall confirmed. Madame Bones was appalled by the lack of due process in his case. She's determined to correct the injustice. Before Harry could respond, the door opened to admit Narcissa Malfoy. She looked as elegant as ever in robes of silver grey, her hair arranged in an intricate style that emphasized her aristocratic features. Mr. Potter, she greeted him. I'm pleased to see you well. The procedure was successful, I trust. Completely, Ragnarok answered for him. Mr. Potter has been freed of the parasite and is recovering admirably. Excellent. Narcissa took a seat across from Harry. I've brought something you might find interesting. She placed a slim leather album on the table. Photographs your mother gave me for safekeeping. Harry stared at the album, hardly daring to believe it. Photos of my mum. Narcissa nodded. And explanations of the connection between our families that may surprise you. With trembling fingers, Harry opened the album. The first photograph showed 2 women in their early 20s, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing at the camera. One was unmistakably his mother, vibrant red hair, bright green eyes, her face alight with happiness. The other, to his astonishment, was a younger Narcissa, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, looking more carefree than he could have imagined possible. I don't understand, Harry said, looking up at Narcissa. My mum's letter said you weren't friends at Hogwarts. We weren't, Narcissa confirmed. Your mother was a Gryffindor, and I was a Slytherin. Our paths rarely crossed during school, and when they did, it wasn't pleasant. She traced the edge of the photograph with one finger. After graduation, however, circumstances brought us together. What circumstances? Harry asked. Narcissa hesitated, exchanging glances with McGonagall. My sister, Andromeda, was disowned by our family for marrying a Muggle-born wizard, Ted Tonks. Despite the risk to her own standing in pureblood society, Lily reached out to Andromeda, offering friendship and support. A shadow of old pain crossed Narcissa's face. I was forbidden to contact my sister, but I missed her terribly. Lily discovered this and arranged a secret meeting. Harry turned the page of the album. The next photograph showed 3 women, Lily, Narcissa, and a third who looked remarkably like Bellatrix Lestrange, though with softer features and lighter hair. Andromeda, Narcissa supplied. People always said she and Bella could have been twins, but their personalities couldn't have been more different. Nymphadora Tonks is her daughter, McGonagall added. Your mother was named her godmother, Harry. Harry's head spun with this new information. Tonks, The young Auror with the ability to change her appearance at will, was related to him through these connections. He had family, of a sort, that he'd never known about. Lily became our bridge, Narcissa continued. Through her, I maintained contact with Andromeda despite my marriage to Lucius and his political allegiances. Your mother understood the complexities of family loyalty in ways few others did. She smiled faintly. She was remarkably stubborn about healing broken relationships. Harry turned more pages in the album, drinking in images of his mother's life that he'd never seen before, Lily and Narcissa at what appeared to be a private tea shop, Lily, visibly pregnant, with both black sisters, Lily holding baby Harry while a young, aristocratic woman who must be Andromeda held a little girl with bright pink hair. Tonks, Harry whispered, recognizing the Metamorphmagus' signature hair color even as an infant. Indeed, Narcissa said. Your mother ensured that these family connections were maintained, even as the war intensified. Harry looked up from the album, his emotions too complex to name. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? Sirius, Remus, anyone? I suspect Sirius was unaware of this particular connection, Narcissa replied. He had broken with our family completely by then. As for Lupin. She shrugged elegantly. Perhaps he thought it would confuse or distress you, given my husband's reputation. There's something else you should know, Potter, McGonagall said gently. Your mother and Alice Longbottom were best friends. Neville's mother was your godmother, just as Sirius was your godfather. Harry sat back, stunned. Neville and I, we could have grown up as almost brothers. That was the plan, McGonagall confirmed. Before the attacks on both your families. The weight of what had been stolen from him, not just parents and inheritance, but an entire network of relationships, connections, and knowledge of his place in the wizarding world, hit Harry with crushing force. All this time, he said hoarsely, I thought I was alone except for the Dursleys. But I had all these connections, people who should have been in my life. Dumbledore isolated you deliberately, Narcissa said, her voice surprisingly gentle. An ignorant child is easier to mold than one who knows their own strength and heritage. Director Ragnarok, who had been silent during this exchange, spoke up. This brings us to an important matter, Mr. Potter. Now that you understand more about your family connections, you should know about the alliances and enmities of House Potter. Alliances? Harry repeated. The old families of Wizarding Britain are connected by formal alliances, treaties, and blood feuds going back centuries, Ragnarok explained. House Potter has historically been allied with Houses Longbottom, Bones, and Abbott. Your father renewed these alliances before his death. Harry thought of Susan Bones and Hannah Abbott, fellow fifth years he barely knew despite this apparent connection. There's also a centuries-old enmity between Houses Potter and Not, Narcissa added. Dating back to a land dispute in the 1700s. And a complicated history with my husband's family. The Potters and Malfoys have been commercial rivals for generations, though never in open conflict. Harry's mind reeled with this information. All these relationships, these connections and conflicts that should have shaped his understanding of the wizarding world, had been kept from him. Potter, McGonagall said carefully, there's something else we discovered in your parents' will. Something Dumbledore was particularly keen to suppress. What now? Harry asked wearily. McGonagall glanced at Ragnarok, who produced a sealed parchment bearing the Potter crest. This is a letter from your parents to be delivered to you upon their deaths, the goblin explained. It was within the sealed portion of their will. Harry took the parchment, breaking the seal with unsteady fingers. Inside was a letter written in two different hands, one a neat, flowing script, the other more bold and angular. His parents' handwriting. Our dearest Harry, if you're reading this, then we have left this world sooner than we hoped, and you have grown up without us. Our hearts break at the thought. There is so much we wanted to teach you, to show you, to give you. Most of all, we wanted to surround you with love every day of your life. There are things you must know, things we've discovered that put us all in danger. We've gone into hiding under the Fidelius charm with Peter Pettigrew as our secret keeper. Not Sirius, as everyone believes. If we have died, and Sirius is being blamed, this is false. Peter was our secret keeper. More importantly, we've discovered disturbing information about Albus Dumbledore and his plans involving a prophecy about you. Albus has been working to engineer a confrontation between you and Voldemort, manipulating events to fulfill the prophecy on his terms. We've taken steps to protect you and our family legacy from his interference. The Goblins have instructions regarding your inheritance and education should anything happen to us. Trust them. They have been allies of the Potter family for centuries. Know that we love you beyond measure, Harry. You were the greatest joy of our lives, our finest achievement, our dearest treasure. We are so proud of you, and we know you will grow to be a fine man regardless of prophecies or the plans others may have for you. Your loving parents, Lily and James Potter. P.S. The phoenix burns, but who tends the ashes? Harry read the letter 3 times, his heart aching with love and loss and rage. His parents had known, they had suspected Dumbledore's manipulations and tried to protect him from beyond the grave. And still, Dumbledore had managed to circumvent their wishes, to hide their warnings, to use Harry as a pawn in his grand strategy. The same phrase, he murmured, pointing to the postscript. My mum used it in her letter to Mrs. Malfoy too. It appears to be a code of some kind, Narcissa said. I've been unable to determine its significance. Perhaps Mr. Potter will uncover its meaning in time, Ragnock suggested. For now, there are decisions to be made about your immediate future, Mr. Potter. The Goblin procedure requires another day of observation, but after that, arrangements must be made for your residence until your godfather's situation is resolved. He'll stay with me, of course, McGonagall said firmly. As his temporary guardian, I have a cottage in the Highlands where we can remain until it's safe to return to Hogwarts. Harry felt a rush of gratitude toward his head of house. The thought of spending time away from Hogwarts in a real home, not Privet Drive or the Dursleys, was appealing, especially if it meant escaping Umbridge's poisonous presence for a few days. That would be perfect, Professor, he said. Thank you. In the meantime, Narcissa said, I believe we should discuss strategy regarding Dumbledore and the other items the Dark Lord has created. You mean the Horcruxes? Harry asked. Narcissa nodded. The Goblins' research suggests some likely objects and locations. If we move quickly, while the Dark Lord still believes his secret is secure, we may be able to eliminate them before he realizes what's happening. You're offering to help find and destroy parts of Voldemort's soul? Harry asked incredulously. But your husband, my husband made choices I did not always agree with, Narcissa interrupted coolly. And while I am bound to him by marriage vows, I am not bound to follow his master. Particularly a master who threatens my son's future. Harry studied her face, looking for signs of deception. He found none, only a mother's fierce determination and perhaps a hint of the friendship she had once shared with Lily Evans. All right, he said finally. Let's hear what the Goblins have found. Director Ragnock unrolled a large parchment map of Britain. Based on our analysis of the soul fragment extracted from your scar, we believe the Dark Lord created his first Horcrux while still at Hogwarts. A diary. Harry's eyes widened. The diary. I destroyed it in the Chamber of Secrets 3 years ago. All eyes turned to him. You destroyed a Horcrux? Narcissa asked, clearly shocked. How? With a basilisk fang, Harry explained. It was Riddle's school diary. It possessed Ginny Weasley and opened the chamber. When I stabbed it, it bled ink and screamed, and the memory of Riddle that was coming out of it disappeared. Ragnock looked both impressed and disturbed. That is consistent with the destruction of a Horcrux. It appears one has already been eliminated, then. What about the others? McGonagall asked. The fragment we extracted contained impressions of the other vessels, Ragnock explained. It seems the Dark Lord favored items of historical significance, particularly those associated with the founders of Hogwarts. We believe he used Salazar Slytherin's locket, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, and Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem. The lost diadem? McGonagall looked skeptical. It's been missing for centuries. Nevertheless, the soul fragment held a clear image of it, Ragnarok insisted. As well as a ring that appears to have belonged to the Gaunt family, the Dark Lord's maternal ancestors. That's 5, Harry counted. The diary, the locket, the cup, the diadem, and the ring. Plus the one that was in me. Yes, Ragnarok confirmed. Though we cannot rule out the possibility that he created more after his resurrection. Where would these objects be hidden? Narcissa asked. The ring is almost certainly at the Gaunt family home, Ragnarok replied. Our records show it in a small village called Little Hangleton. The cup. He hesitated. This is where matters become complicated. We believe it may be in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. Narcissa inhaled sharply. Bellatrix's vault? Yes. Before her imprisonment, Bellatrix Lestrange was one of the Dark Lord's most trusted followers. It would be logical for him to entrust one of his precious artifacts to her. Can you check? Harry asked. I mean, it's your bank. Ragnarok looked uncomfortable. Gringotts' policy forbids examining the contents of a vault without the owner's presence or consent. However, he exchanged glances with the other goblins present. Given the extraordinary circumstances and the dark nature of the object in question, we may be able to justify a security inspection. What about the others? McGonagall pressed. The locket and diadem? The locket's location is unclear, Ragnarok admitted. The soul fragment's memories show it being hidden in a cave by the sea, but later moved. As for the diadem. He turned to Harry. The fragment seemed to associate it strongly with Hogwarts itself. It's at Hogwarts? Harry asked incredulously. All this time? It appears so, Ragnarok confirmed. In a place described as, where things are hidden. Harry's eyes widened in sudden realization. The room of requirement. When it becomes the room of hidden things. You know this place? Narcissa asked sharply. Yes, it's on the 7th floor, Harry explained. It transforms based on what you need. If you need a place to hide something, it becomes this enormous room filled with thousands of objects that people have hidden over the centuries. McGonagall looked stunned. I've worked at Hogwarts for decades and never knew of such a room. The castle keeps some secrets even from its staff, Narcissa murmured. This is valuable information, Mr. Potter. When you return to Hogwarts, finding this diadem should be a priority. What about the locket? Harry asked. If it was moved from the cave, where would it be now? That is less clear, Ragnarok admitted. Though there may be a connection to House Black. Narcissa frowned. House Black? How? The fragment's memories included an image of a house elf. One bearing the Black family crest. Harry and Narcissa spoke simultaneously, creature. Of course, Narcissa said. My cousin Regulus was a Death Eater who disappeared mysteriously. If he discovered the Dark Lord's secret and took the locket. It could be at Grimmauld Place right now, Harry finished. We need to tell Sirius immediately. I'll send word to Lupin, McGonagall said, standing. He can have Black search the house once his name is cleared. The meeting continued for another hour, with plans made for investigating each potential Horcrux location. Harry found himself impressed by Narcissa's strategic thinking and detailed knowledge of both Death Eater operations and obscure magical history. Despite her Malfoy connections, she seemed genuinely committed to destroying Voldemort's soul anchors. As the meeting concluded, Harry was escorted back to his recovery room for additional rest and monitoring. The day had been mentally exhausting, if not physically demanding. His mind raced with everything he'd learned, about his family, his connections, the Horcruxes, and the path forward. For the first time, defeating Voldemort seemed not just a desperate hope but an achievable goal. And for the first time, Harry felt truly in control of his own destiny. The next morning, the wizarding world awoke to explosive headlines in the Daily Prophet: Dumbledore suspended, financial scandal rocks Hogwarts, Potter inheritance plundered, will suppressed by Rita Skeeter, special correspondent. In a shocking turn of events that has sent tremors through wizarding Britain, Albus Dumbledore, long-revered headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, has been suspended from his position following allegations of financial impropriety involving the Potter family estate. Sources within Gringotts confirm that Dumbledore has been systematically withdrawing funds from the Potter vaults since the tragic deaths of James and Lily Potter in 1981, using his position as Harry Potter's self-appointed magical guardian to access one of the largest private fortunes in wizarding Britain. The scale of the theft is staggering, reveals a Gringotts insider. Millions of galleons redirected to various recipients, including Order of the Phoenix members, ministry officials, and even Potter's Muggle relatives. Perhaps most disturbing is the revelation that Dumbledore sealed the Potter's will, a document that explicitly stated Harry Potter was never to be placed with his Muggle relatives and named Sirius Black as his rightful guardian. Dumbledore threw Sirius Black to the Dementors without a trial, knowing he was innocent, claims our source. All to maintain control over the boy who lived and his fortune. Mr. Potter is reportedly undergoing treatment at Gringotts for magical suppression caused by illegal blood wards Dumbledore placed on him as an infant. These wards, designed to protect Potter from outside threats, allegedly drained his magical core for years, potentially limiting his development as a wizard. It's a miracle the boy has shown any magical talent at all, states an unnamed healing specialist. To think what he might have become without this suppression. Minerva McGonagall, deputy headmistress of Hogwarts, has been named Potter's temporary guardian pending a hearing to clear Sirius Black's name. Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, has launched a full investigation into both the financial irregularities and the circumstances surrounding Black's imprisonment. Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge expressed shock at the allegations. If proven true, these actions represent a profound breach of trust. The ministry will cooperate fully with Gringotts and the DMLE to ensure justice is served. Dumbledore, currently under house arrest in Hogsmeade, has declined to comment. For more on the Potter family fortune, see page 4. For analysis of Dumbledore's financial transactions, see page 6. For reaction from the Wisengamot, see page 9. Accompanying the article was a photograph of Harry looking thin and vulnerable in his Hogwarts robes, alongside an imposing shot of Gringotts Bank and a smiling portrait of Dumbledore that now appeared sinister in context. The article set off a firestorm of reactions throughout wizarding Britain. At Hogwarts, students gathered in shocked clusters, debating the revelations and reassessing their view of the beloved headmaster. The staff room was tense, with professors divided between those who refused to believe the allegations and those who admitted they had long harbored suspicions about Dumbledore's methods. Severus Snape sat alone in his dungeon office, a glass of fire whiskey in his hand despite the early hour. The news had hit him like a physical blow. Lily's wishes ignored. Her son deliberately suppressed and manipulated. All while Dumbledore had sworn to him that Potter was being protected, cherished even. For years, Snape had justified his loathing of the boy as an extension of his hatred for James Potter. But now, faced with the reality of the child's suffering and exploitation, uncomfortable parallels to his own manipulation by Dumbledore began to emerge. Albus had always known exactly which strings to pull: Snape's guilt over Lily, his desire for redemption, his need to belong somewhere after burning all other bridges. Had Potter been subject to the same masterful manipulation? The thought was unsettling. A knock at his door interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he called sharply. Draco Malfoy stepped into the office, his pale face uncharacteristically serious. "Professor Snape," he began without preamble, "I've received a letter from my mother. She wants me to meet her in Hogsmeade this afternoon. Something about recent developments regarding Potter." Snape studied his godson carefully. "And what do you make of these developments, Mr. Malfoy?" Draco hesitated, clearly torn. It's confusing, sir. My father always said Dumbledore was a manipulative old fool pretending to be a saint, but this. He gestured vaguely toward the newspaper on Snape's desk. And now Mother is somehow involved. She mentions family obligations and promises to the past that I don't understand. Your mother, Snape said carefully, has always had a more nuanced view of wizarding politics than your father. It would be wise to hear what she has to say with an open mind. But Potter, Draco began. May not be exactly who either of us thought he was, Snape interrupted. Go to Hogsmeade, speak with your mother, and then come see me again. We have much to discuss. Draco nodded, some of his usual confidence returning. Yes, sir. Thank you. As the door closed behind his student, Snape returned to his contemplation of the fire whiskey and the uncomfortable revelations of the day. His world, like so many others, had been upended. The carefully constructed narrative he'd built around Harry Potter, spoiled, arrogant, glorying in his fame, was crumbling in the face of evidence that the boy had been just another pawn in Dumbledore's grand game. Just as Snape himself had been. At Gringotts, Harry was blissfully unaware of the media explosion his situation had triggered. He spent the morning with the goblin healers, undergoing additional examinations to ensure his magic was stabilizing properly after the Horcrux removal. Your core is expanding remarkably quickly, the head healer noted. It appears the foreign soul fragment was suppressing more than we initially estimated. You may experience surges in your magical abilities over the coming weeks as your body adjusts. What kind of surges? Harry asked, watching as a glowing diagram of his magical core hovered over his chest, a swirling sphere of gold and green energy that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Increased power in spellcasting, certainly, the healer replied. Possibly enhanced magical perception. Some patients report improved memory and mental clarity as well. Harry had already noticed the latter. His thoughts seemed sharper, more organized. Memories he hadn't known he possessed were becoming accessible, details from his early childhood, snippets of conversations long forgotten, even material from classes he'd barely paid attention to. After the examination, he was escorted to a different conference room where Professor McGonagall waited with an unexpected visitor. Sirius! Harry exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace his godfather. Sirius Black looked better than Harry had ever seen him. Gone was the gaunt, haunted appearance of his Azkaban years. His hair was neatly trimmed, his robes new and well-fitted. Most striking was the light in his eyes, the shadows of Azkaban finally beginning to recede. Harry, Sirius replied, returning the hug fiercely. Thank Merlin you're all right. When Remus told me what Dumbledore had done. Mr. Black received an expedited hearing this morning, McGonagall explained. Madam Bones presented the evidence from your parents will along with Pettigrew's continued existence as documented during the events at Hogwarts 2 years ago. The Wizengamot had no choice but to clear me, Sirius said, his voice thick with emotion. Officially exonerated of all charges, with a formal apology from the Ministry and compensation for wrongful imprisonment. That's brilliant! Harry exclaimed. So you're free? Really free? Completely, Sirius confirmed. I can walk down Diagon Alley in broad daylight. I can claim my seat on the Wizengamot. And most importantly, his voice softened, I can officially be your guardian, just as your parents wanted. Harry felt a lump form in his throat. After all the revelations of the past few days, this was the one bright spot that outshone all the darkness, the fulfillment of his parents' wishes, the family they had intended for him. There's one more piece of good news, Sirius added, his eyes twinkling mischievously. Guess what creature found at Grimmauld Place? Harry's eyes widened. The locket? Slytherin's locket? Sirius nodded. Hidden in a cabinet of black family trinkets. Turns out my brother Regulus wasn't the faithful Death Eater we all thought. According to Creature, he discovered Voldemort's secret and stole the Horcrux, intending to destroy it. It cost him his life, but he died defying Voldemort, not serving him. So we have the locket, Harry said excitedly. That's 2 Horcruxes accounted for, the diary I destroyed and now the locket. The goblins have already taken possession of it, Sirius confirmed. They're preparing to destroy it along with the fragment from your scar. McGonagall cleared her throat. We've received word about the cup as well. Director Ragnarok authorized a security inspection of the Lestrange vault citing concerns about dark artifacts, and they located Hufflepuff's cup. It has been quarantined pending resolution of certain legal matters. What legal matters? Harry asked. The goblins can't simply remove items from a client's vault, McGonagall explained. However, they're exploring the possibility that as the victim of the dark magic in question, you may have some claim that supersedes the Lestrange's ownership. It's a stretch, Sirius admitted, but the goblins are motivated to find a solution. They have no love for Voldemort or his followers. The door opened, and Director Ragnarok entered with Narcissa Malfoy. Harry noticed that Sirius immediately tensed at the sight of his cousin. Narcissa, he said coldly. I understand you've been helpful. Cousin, she replied with equal coolness. Congratulations on your exoneration. It was long overdue. An awkward silence fell between them, 2 members of the same family who had found themselves on opposite sides of a war, now forced into an uneasy alliance. Perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand, Ragnarok suggested diplomatically. The destruction of the Horcruxes. We have located the ring as well, Narcissa added. A goblin team investigated the Gaunt Shack in Little Hangleton and found it hidden beneath the floorboards, protected by several deadly curses. They've contained it but haven't attempted to destroy it yet. That's 4 accounted for, Harry said, counting off on his fingers. The diary, the locket, the cup, and the ring. That just leaves the diadem at Hogwarts. Which we can retrieve when you return to school, McGonagall said. The question is how to destroy them safely. Basilisk venom worked for the diary, but it's not exactly easy to come by. Actually, Harry said thoughtfully, there's an entire basilisk carcass in the Chamber of Secrets. I killed it in my 2nd year. Would the fangs still be effective? The adults stared at him in astonishment. You killed a basilisk? Narcissa asked faintly. At 12 years old. Harry shrugged, uncomfortable with their attention. I had Fawkes's help. And the Sorting Hat brought me Gryffindor's sword. Gryffindor's sword, Ragnarok repeated, his eyes gleaming. A goblin-made blade. It would have absorbed the basilisk venom, making it capable of destroying Horcruxes indefinitely. The sword is in the Headmaster's office, McGonagall said. I can retrieve it when we return to Hogwarts. And the basilisk remains? Narcissa asked, her practical nature asserting itself. They would be incredibly valuable for potions ingredients. The venom alone is worth a fortune. I never thought about it, Harry admitted. It's just been down there since 2nd year. As the slayer of the beast, you have the right to claim it, Ragnarok informed him. Goblin law is clear on this point, and wizarding law concurs. The basilisk and all its parts legally belong to you, Mr. Potter. Yet another unexpected inheritance, Harry thought wryly. Well, if the venom and fangs can help destroy the Horcruxes, that's what matters most. Indeed, Ragnarok agreed. Now, let us discuss the timetable for your return to Hogwarts. The healing process requires 1 more day of observation, after which you'll be free to leave Gringotts. However, I would recommend proceeding directly to a secure location rather than returning to school immediately. I've prepared my cottage in the Highlands, McGonagall said. It's under the Fidelius charm, with myself as secret keeper. And I've been working with Amelia Bones to prepare a press statement, Sirius added. The Prophet article this morning was just the beginning. People are demanding answers about Dumbledore's actions. The Prophet? Harry asked, suddenly alarmed. What article? Sirius winced. Ah, I forgot you wouldn't have seen it. He pulled a folded newspaper from his robes. Rita Skeeter somehow got hold of the story. It's actually fairly accurate for once, though with her usual flair for the dramatic. Harry scanned the article, his heart sinking. More public attention, more scrutiny, more people talking about him and his private business. Just when he thought he might have some control over his own life. This is a disaster, he muttered. Everyone will be staring and whispering again. Perhaps, Narcissa said unexpectedly, but consider this, for once, the story portrays you as a victim of manipulation rather than an attention-seeking troublemaker. Public sympathy will be with you, not against you. She's right, Sirius agreed reluctantly. This changes the narrative completely. You're no longer, crazy Harry Potter claiming Voldemort's back, but poor Harry Potter, exploited by Dumbledore all these years. I don't want to be either of those things, Harry protested. I just want to be, normal. Normal isn't an option for you, Potter, McGonagall said, not unkindly. It never has been. But perhaps now you can be extraordinary on your own terms, rather than someone else's. Her words struck a chord. Harry had spent his life being defined by others, the Dursleys' unwanted burden, Dumbledore's weapon against Voldemort, the wizarding world's savior or scapegoat depending on the day. Maybe it was time to define himself. When I go back to Hogwarts, he said slowly, I want things to be different. I want to know more about my family, about the alliances and connections I should have grown up understanding. I want to find that diadem and destroy it. And then I want to focus on learning magic, really learning it, not just enough to pass exams or fight Death Eaters. Sirius smiled proudly. That sounds like an excellent plan. And as your guardian, I'll do everything I can to support it. As will I, McGonagall added. Your parents would be proud of your maturity, Potter. Even Narcissa nodded approvingly. A wise approach, Mr. Potter. Knowledge is power, especially in the wizarding world. Harry looked at the unlikely allies gathered around him, his transfiguration professor, his escaped convict godfather, the wife of a Death Eater, and the goblin director of Gringotts. Not the support system his parents had planned for him, perhaps, but one with unique strengths and perspectives. For the first time in his life, Harry felt not just protected but empowered. The path ahead was still dangerous, still uncertain, but it was his path to choose. While Harry prepared to leave Gringotts the following day, Draco Malfoy sat in the private room of the Three Broomsticks, trying to process everything his mother had just told him. Potter's been living with muggles who abused him, he repeated incredulously. And Dumbledore knew. Paid them, even. Yes, Narcissa confirmed. The evidence is incontrovertible. Albus Dumbledore, the great champion of Muggleborns and Muggle rights, left the savior of the wizarding world with muggles who treated him worse than we treat our house elves. Draco shifted uncomfortably. The narrative he'd constructed about Potter over the years, spoiled, arrogant, reveling in his fame, was disintegrating in the face of his mother's revelations. And you're helping him because, you made a promise to his mother, he asked, still struggling to understand. I didn't know you even knew Lily Potter. There are many things you don't know about the First War, Draco, Narcissa said quietly. Many choices made, relationships formed and broken, that shaped the world you grew up in. She sipped her tea delicately. Lily Evans Potter saved my relationship with my sister. For that alone, I owed her a debt. But there was more to it than that. What about father? Draco asked, lowering his voice. Does he know what you're doing? A shadow crossed Narcissa's face. Your father's choices have placed our family in a precarious position, Draco. He believes the Dark Lord's return is an opportunity to regain influence and power. I believe it is a threat to your future and our family's survival. Draco stared at his mother, seeing her with new eyes. Always, he had thought of his father as the strategist of the family, the one who made the important decisions. Now he realized that his mother had been playing a deeper game all along. The Dark Lord will kill Potter, he said slowly. That's his main goal, isn't it? He will try, Narcissa agreed. But recent developments have made that outcome less certain. The goblins removed something from Potter, Draco guessed. Something important. Narcissa smiled slightly. You always were perceptive, my dragon. Yes, the Dark Lord inadvertently left a piece of himself in Potter the night he tried to kill him. The goblins have removed it, which changes the balance of power significantly. Draco's mind raced, connecting pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed until now. So Potter isn't marked to die anymore. He might actually win. The outcome is uncertain, Narcissa replied carefully. But I am positioning our family to survive regardless of who emerges victorious. That is why I need your help, Draco. My help, he echoed. When Potter returns to Hogwarts, he will be viewed differently by many students. His allies will be strengthened by public sympathy, while Dumbledore's supporters will be divided and uncertain. This creates an opportunity for reconciliation. Draco's eyes widened as he understood what his mother was suggesting. You want me to make peace with Potter? After everything between us? I want you to reassess your position, Narcissa corrected. Potter is no longer just a half-blood Gryffindor with an inflated reputation. He is the head of House Potter, with considerable political and financial resources at his disposal. More importantly, he is now connected to our family through my actions and my promise to his mother. The implications were staggering. For years, Draco had defined himself in opposition to Harry Potter, the rival, the enemy, the symbol of everything his father taught him to despise about Dumbledore's vision for the wizarding world. Could he really set that aside? I don't have to like him, do I? He asked finally. Narcissa's lips curved in a small smile. No, Draco. You don't have to like him. You simply need to recognize that the political landscape is shifting, and our family must shift with it to survive. Draco nodded slowly. I understand. I'll find a way to approach him when he returns. That's my clever boy, Narcissa said approvingly. Now, there's one more matter we should discuss. The item hidden at Hogwarts. Draco listened intently as his mother explained about the lost diadem of Ravenclaw, its corruption by the Dark Lord, and its likely location in the Room of Requirement. By the time their meeting concluded, his world had been thoroughly upended, but he had a clear mission and a new understanding of the complexities of wizarding politics. As he walked back to the castle, Draco found himself wondering what Potter was really like, beneath the reputation and the rivalry that had defined their relationship for years. Perhaps it was finally time to find out. The final day of Harry's stay at Gringotts passed quickly. The goblin healers pronounced him fully recovered from the Horcrux removal, noting with satisfaction that his magical core was stabilizing at a level significantly higher than before. Your magical signature is stronger and more defined, the head healer explained. You may find certain spells easier to cast, while others might require adjustment to your technique. I recommend practicing even simple charms to recalibrate your expectations. Harry had already noticed differences in his magic. During a simple test of levitation, he'd sent a feather shooting to the ceiling with barely a thought. His Lumos charm had nearly blinded the goblin administering the test. It was exhilarating but also slightly alarming, like suddenly finding himself driving a much more powerful broom without warning. By evening, all preparations were complete for his departure. The Horcruxes recovered so far, the locket, the ring, and the fragment from Harry's scar, had been contained in special vessels and would be destroyed in a goblin ritual the following day. The cup remained in limbo, still technically in the Lestrange vault but under goblin quarantine. Harry met with Director Ragnarok one final time to review the status of his inheritance and sign necessary documents as the head of House Potter. Your family vault has been restored with the assets we've been able to recover, Ragnarok explained. Approximately 60% of what was taken has been returned through seizure of Dumbledore's personal accounts and voluntary restitution from recipients who claimed ignorance of the fund's source. The Weasleys? Harry asked anxiously. The Weasley family has been cleared of any wrongdoing, Ragnarok assured him. Our investigation confirmed that Arthur Weasley believed the additional funds were legitimate ministry stipends for his department. When informed of their true source, he and his wife were deeply distressed and immediately offered to return every Canute, despite their limited means. Relief flooded through Harry. The thought that the Weasleys, the first real family to show him kindness, might have been accepting payment for their friendship had been unbearable. "Tell them they don't need to return anything," he said firmly. "Whatever they received, they earned through genuine kindness." Ragnarok made a note. "As you wish." Now, regarding properties, the Potter family owns several residences, including Potter Cottage in Godric's Hollow, which is currently maintained as a memorial, Potter Manor in Wales, which has been sealed since your grandparents' deaths, a villa in southern France, and a townhouse in London. All have been confirmed secure and under proper maintenance charms. The idea of owning multiple homes was bewildering to Harry, who had never had so much as his own bedroom until Hogwarts. "Can I visit them?" "Of course," Ragnarok replied. "They are your property. Though I would recommend Potter Manor as your primary residence once your education is complete. It has the strongest protections and most significant historical connection to your family line." The meeting continued with discussions of investments, business interests, and family heirlooms recovered from Dumbledore's possession. By the time they finished, Harry's head was spinning with the extent of his inheritance and the responsibilities that came with it. "Don't worry, Mr. Potter," Ragnarok said, noting his overwhelmed expression. "You have capable advisors in Professor McGonagall and Mr. Black, as well as the continuing support of Gringotts in managing your estate." "Thank you," Harry said sincerely. "For everything, the ritual, the Horcrux hunt, sorting out my inheritance. I don't know how I can repay you." Ragnarok's expression turned solemn. "The Potter family has long been a friend to the Goblin nation, treating us with respect when many wizards did not. In helping you, we honor that tradition of mutual respect." That said, his eyes gleamed. "The basilisk remains in the Chamber of Secrets represent a significant opportunity for both parties. Perhaps we might discuss a harvesting and profit-sharing arrangement when you return to Hogwarts." Harry grinned. "Trust a goblin to find the business opportunity in any situation. I'd be happy to discuss it." As the meeting concluded, Sirius and Professor McGonagall arrived to escort Harry to their next destination, McGonagall's cottage in the Highlands, where they would spend the night before returning to Hogwarts the following day. "Ready to go, pup?" Sirius asked, using the nickname that always warmed Harry's heart. "More than ready," Harry replied. "Though I have to admit, the goblins have been brilliant. They respect strength and honor," McGonagall noted. "You've shown them both." As they prepared to depart, Narcissa Malfoy appeared for a final farewell. "Mr. Potter," she said formally. "I've taken the liberty of speaking with my son about recent developments. He may approach you when you return to school. I would ask that you hear him out." Harry raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Draco wants to talk to me?" "Without insults." A hint of amusement crossed Narcissa's face. "I've impressed upon him the changing political landscape. Whether friendship is possible between you remains to be seen, but a cessation of hostilities would benefit both your houses." "I'll listen to what he has to say," Harry agreed cautiously. After everything he'd learned about family alliances and wizarding politics, he could understand the strategic value of neutrality with the Malfoys, even if friendship seemed far-fetched. "That is all I ask," Narcissa said with a slight nod. "We will continue to coordinate regarding the items we discussed. Until then, Mr. Potter, I wish you good fortune in the challenges ahead." With final farewells to the goblins, Harry departed Gringotts with Sirius and McGonagall, stepping out into Diagon Alley under the cover of darkness. Despite the late hour, the street was not entirely deserted, and heads turned as people recognized Sirius Black walking freely beside the boy who lived. They moved quickly to an apparition point, McGonagall gripping Harry's arm firmly. "Hold tight, Potter. The first time is always uncomfortable." With a crack, they disappeared, reappearing moments later on a windswept hillside overlooking a vast loch. Harry staggered, his stomach lurching violently. "Breathe through it," Sirius advised, steadying him. "The feeling passes quickly." As the world stopped spinning, Harry took in his surroundings. They stood before a small stone cottage with a thatched roof, smoke curling from the chimney. Beyond it stretched miles of rugged highland scenery, mountains, forests, and the dark waters of the loch reflecting the stars above. "Welcome to my home," McGonagall said, a warmth in her voice Harry rarely heard at school. "It's been in my family for generations." Inside, the cottage was larger than it appeared from outside, not through magical extension, but through clever design that made use of every space. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a golden glow over comfortable furnishings that somehow perfectly balanced McGonagall's practicality with unexpected touches of coziness. "I've prepared the guest rooms upstairs," she informed them. "But perhaps some tea first? It's been a long day." As they settled in the sitting room with steaming mugs, Harry felt tension he hadn't realized he was carrying begin to ease. For the first time in days, perhaps years, he felt truly safe. Not just physically protected, but emotionally secure, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him. "Tomorrow we return to Hogwarts," McGonagall said, "and things will inevitably become complicated again. But tonight, we can simply rest and prepare." "What should I expect when we go back?" Harry asked. "After that Prophet article?" Sirius grimaced. "A media circus, almost certainly. Dumbledore has been the most respected wizard in Britain for decades. His fall from grace is the biggest scandal since. Well, since Voldemort's first defeat. The student body will be divided," McGonagall added. "Many remain loyal to Albus despite the evidence. Others will view you with new sympathy or curiosity. The staff, too, are split in their reactions." "And Umbridge?" Harry asked, the name alone souring his mood. McGonagall's expression hardened. "Dolores is attempting to use the situation to expand the Ministry's influence at Hogwarts. However, Professor Flitwick has proven remarkably adept at countering her maneuvers. It helps that Madame Bones is now personally involved in overseeing the transition." "What about Dumbledore himself?" Harry asked. Will he try to contact me?" Sirius and McGonagall exchanged glances. "He's under house arrest and magical monitoring," Sirius explained. "He can't enter Hogwarts or communicate directly with you. But Albus has many loyal supporters who might act as intermediaries. Be cautious of unexpected messages or invitations," McGonagall warned. "Even well-meaning staff might be trying to facilitate communication they believe is in your best interest." Harry nodded, appreciating their honesty. "And the Horcrux hunt? How do we proceed with finding the diadem?" "You mentioned the Room of Requirement," McGonagall said. "Upon our return, you'll need to show me its location and how to access it. Once we've identified the diadem, we can retrieve Gryffindor's sword from the Headmaster's office for its destruction." "The Goblins also provided this," Sirius added, removing a small, rune-covered device from his pocket. "It's a Horcrux detector, calibrated using the fragment they removed from you. It should help identify the diadem among the thousands of objects you described in that room." The conversation continued into the night, covering plans for Harry's living arrangements during holidays, Sirius's newly renovated home in Hogsmeade, far from the grim confines of Grimmauld Place, his academic focus for the remainder of the year, and strategies for handling the inevitable public attention. By the time Harry climbed the narrow staircase to his guest room, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not just for surviving Voldemort, but for building a life worth living afterward. He fell asleep quickly, his dreams for once untroubled by visions of corridors or Voldemort's thoughts. The severing of the Horcrux connection had brought him true mental privacy for the first time since the attack on Godric's Hollow. In the morning, he would return to Hogwarts to face new challenges and old enemies. But he would do so standing taller, seeing clearer, and with the knowledge that he was no longer walking a path laid out by Albus Dumbledore. For the first time, Harry Potter was authoring his own destiny. The return to Hogwarts was every bit as chaotic as Harry had anticipated. Despite McGonagall's efforts to arrange a discreet arrival through her office floor, word of their coming spread throughout the castle with preternatural speed. By the time they emerged into the corridor, students were lined up along the route to Gryffindor Tower, whispering and pointing as Harry passed. Some called out words of support. Others watched with undisguised curiosity. A few Slytherin sneered, though Harry noticed that Draco Malfoy, standing at the back of a group of his housemates, merely observed with an inscrutable expression. "Keep moving, Potter," McGonagall instructed briskly. "Mr. Black, perhaps you should wait in my office until this commotion dies down." "Not a chance, Minerva," Sirius replied cheerfully, staying close to Harry's side. His public exoneration had been featured prominently in that morning's Prophet, but his presence still drew gasps and wide eyes from students who had grown up hearing tales of the infamous Sirius Black. They had almost reached Gryffindor Tower when a high, girlish voice called out from behind them. "Hem, hem. Professor McGonagall, Mr. Potter, a moment, please." Umbridge hurried toward them, her pink cardigan and black velvet bow as revolting as ever. Her wide, toad-like smile didn't reach her eyes, which remained cold and calculating. "Professor Umbridge," McGonagall acknowledged stiffly. "We are rather busy at the moment." "I'm sure you are," Umbridge simpered. "However, as High Inquisitor, I must insist on an immediate debriefing with Mr. Potter regarding his unauthorized absence from school. The Minister is most concerned about the circumstances." As Mr. Potter's legal guardian, Sirius interjected smoothly, "I authorized his absence for medical treatment, which is perfectly within my rights. Any concerns the Minister may have can be addressed to my solicitor." Umbridge's smile faltered as she took in Sirius's presence. "Mr. Black. How unexpected to see you at Hogwarts." "I'm accompanying my godson back to school following his medical procedure," Sirius replied with exaggerated politeness. "Surely the Ministry wouldn't interfere with a guardian's duty of care." "Of course not," Umbridge said quickly, though her eyes narrowed. "However, there is still the matter of Mr. Potter's allegations regarding you-know-who's return. The Ministry's position remains unchanged on that issue." "Actually, Dolores," came a new voice, "the Ministry's position is currently under review." Amelia Bones approached from the direction of the Headmaster's office, her monocle glinting in the torchlight. She wore formal robes bearing the insignia of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. "Madam Bones," Umbridge said, her voice rising slightly. "I wasn't aware you were visiting the school today." "Evidently," Bones replied dryly. "I've been conducting interviews as part of our investigation into Albus Dumbledore's activities. Given the evidence that has emerged regarding his systematic suppression of information, the Ministry is reassessing several of his more significant claims, including those relating to the events of last June." Harry could hardly believe what he was hearing. Was the Ministry actually considering the possibility that he'd been telling the truth about Voldemort's return? "I'm sure we can discuss this at a more appropriate time," Umbridge said hastily. "Mr. Potter must be tired from his journey." "Indeed he must," Bones agreed. "Professor McGonagall, please continue escorting Mr. Potter to his dormitory. Mr. Black, if I might have a word about certain arrangements we discussed." With that masterful interruption, the confrontation with Umbridge was diffused. Harry and McGonagall continued to Gryffindor Tower, leaving Sirius and Madam Bones to deal with the fuming High Inquisitor. "That was brilliant," Harry murmured to McGonagall. "Amelia Bones is one of the few Ministry officials with both integrity and political acumen," McGonagall replied quietly. "Her support in this matter has been invaluable." When they reached the portrait of the fat lady, McGonagall turned to Harry. "Get some rest, Potter. Tomorrow morning, we'll meet in my office to discuss the Room of Requirement and the retrieval of the diadem. The password is Veritas." "Thank you, Professor," Harry said sincerely. "For everything." McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "Your parents would be proud of how you've handled these difficult revelations, Potter." "I know I am." With that unexpectedly warm endorsement, she departed, leaving Harry to face his housemates alone. Taking a deep breath, he gave the password to the fat lady and stepped through the portrait hole. The common room fell silent as he entered, dozens of eyes turning to him at once. Then, from the corner near the fire, Ron and Hermione rushed forward. "Harry!" Hermione cried, throwing her arms around him. "Thank goodness you're all right." "Good to see you, mate," Ron said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You look different." "I feel different," Harry admitted. "It's hard to explain." Before he could say more, the rest of the Gryffindors swarmed around him, peppering him with questions about Dumbledore, the Goblins, his inheritance, and a dozen other topics drawn from the Prophet's coverage. "Give him space," Fred called out. "Can't you see the man needs to breathe? Anyone who isn't Ron, Hermione, Ginny, or Neville, back off," George added, creating a barrier with his arms. Gradually, the crowd dispersed, though many continued to watch from a distance as Harry settled into an armchair by the fire with his closest friends. "Is it true?" Ginny asked immediately. "About Dumbledore stealing from you? About the will?" Harry nodded grimly. "All of it. And more that didn't make it into the papers. Like the Horcrux," Hermione whispered, casting a quick privacy charm around their group. "You told them?" Harry asked, surprised but not upset. "Only the basics," Ron assured him. "About the soul fragment and the goblins removing it. We thought they should know what we're really fighting against." "It's fine," Harry said. "Actually, it's good. Because we need your help with the next part." He explained about the Horcrux hunt, the objects already located, and the diadem believed to be hidden in the Room of Requirement. As he spoke, he was struck by how natural it felt to include them all, not just Ron and Hermione, but Ginny and Neville too. The Department of Mystery's dream team, he thought with an inward smile. "We need to find it as soon as possible," he concluded. "McGonagall and I are going to search the room tomorrow morning, but having more eyes would help." "We're in," Neville said immediately. "I can't believe my parents were supposed to be your guardians, Harry. It's like, we were meant to be friends all along." "That's right," Harry said, feeling a renewed connection to the shy boy who had grown so much more confident over the past year. "Your mum was my godmother, Neville. We should have grown up together." "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Ginny observed. "Not just about Dumbledore, but about how we fight this war." "It does," Harry agreed. "We're not following Dumbledore's plan anymore. We're making our own." "What about Sirius?" Ron asked. "He's really free now?" "Officially." Harry couldn't contain his grin. "Completely exonerated. He's going to be living in Hogsmeade so he can be near the school. I'll be staying with him during holidays." "That's wonderful, Harry," Hermione exclaimed. "After everything he's been through, he deserves this freedom." "And what about you?" Ginny asked, studying Harry's face. "You seem different. Not just the scar." She gestured to his forehead, where the lightning bolt was now a faint silver line rather than the angry red mark it had been before. "I feel different," Harry admitted. "Clearer. Stronger. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't even know about, and suddenly it's gone." He hesitated, then added, "My magic feels different too. More accessible, somehow." "The goblins mentioned that might happen," Hermione said excitedly. "With the foreign magic gone, your own magic can expand to its natural potential." "I've already noticed some changes," Harry agreed. "Simple spells coming more easily. Memories I'd forgotten suddenly clear as day." "That's bloody brilliant," Ron said admiringly. "Bet Umbridge will love dealing with a powered-up Harry Potter." They all laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. As the conversation continued, Harry felt a profound sense of gratitude for these friends who had stood by him through every challenge, who believed in him when others doubted, who were ready to follow him on this new path. The portrait hole opened, and Sirius entered, escorted by Professor Flitwick. The tiny charms professor had been exceptionally supportive throughout the entire affair, taking on the responsibilities of acting headmaster with surprising authority. "Mr. Potter," Flitwick squeaked. "I thought you might appreciate a few minutes with your godfather before he departs. I'll wait outside." With a friendly nod to the assembled students, he exited through the portrait hole. Sirius crossed to their corner, greeting each of Harry's friends warmly before settling into an armchair. "Madame Bones is a formidable ally," he told Harry. "She's pushing for a formal ministry statement acknowledging the possibility that your account of Voldemort's return might be accurate. It's not a full endorsement, but it's a start." "That's more than I expected," Harry admitted. "The revelation about Dumbledore has shaken people's certainties," Sirius explained. "If he could be wrong, or deliberately deceptive, about something as fundamental as your guardianship and inheritance, what else might he have manipulated?" "What about the order?" Hermione asked quietly. "What happens to it now?" Sirius's expression turned serious. "That's complicated. Many members are reassessing their loyalty to Albus, but the order itself, its purpose of opposing Voldemort, remains essential. There's talk of restructuring under new leadership." "You?" Harry suggested. Sirius barked a laugh. "Merlin, no. I'm still rebuilding my life after 12 years in Azkaban. Amelia Bones is the most likely candidate, with Kingsley and Moody handling operations." "What about Professor Lupin?" Neville asked. "Remus is focused on outreach to the werewolf communities," Sirius replied. "Trying to counter Greyback's recruitment efforts for Voldemort." His expression softened. "He sends his best, Harry. He wanted to be here but had an urgent meeting with a pack in Scotland." As the conversation continued, Harry realized how much had changed in just a few days. The Order restructuring. The Ministry reconsidering its position. Dumbledore's fall from grace. Sirius's freedom. His own liberation from the Horcrux. Each change represented a deviation from Voldemort's expected path, from the future he had planned. For the first time, Harry felt they might have a genuine chance to defeat the Dark Lord, not through Dumbledore's cryptic manipulations or a prophesied destiny, but through their own choices and actions. When Sirius finally departed for his new home in Hogsmeade, promising to visit again soon, Harry felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Tomorrow they would search for the diadem. Tomorrow they would take another step toward Voldemort's defeat. But tonight, surrounded by friends who had become family, Harry Potter simply allowed himself to feel what had been in short supply throughout his life: hope. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a rarity for Scottish autumn. Harry met Professor McGonagall at her office as arranged, bringing Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Ginny with him. "I see you've enlisted assistance," McGonagall observed, raising an eyebrow at the group. "If there really are thousands of hidden objects in the room, we'll need all the help we can get," Harry explained. "Everyone here knows about the Horcruxes and has proven they can be trusted." McGonagall studied the determined faces before her and nodded. "Very well. Lead the way, Potter." As they made their way to the 7th floor, Harry briefed the group on what to look for. "The diadem of Ravenclaw is a kind of tiara. According to the Goblins, it's silver with a large sapphire and the Ravenclaw motto, 'Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure.' How will we know if it's a Horcrux?" Neville asked nervously. "Will it do something?" "The Goblins gave us this," Harry replied, showing them the small, rune-covered device Sirius had passed to him. "It's calibrated to detect the same dark magic signature as the other Horcruxes." When they reached the blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, Harry demonstrated how to access the room of requirement, pacing back and forth 3 times while thinking clearly, "We need to find the place where everything is hidden." A door materialized in the stone wall, ornate and ancient-looking. Harry pushed it open, revealing the cathedral-like space beyond, a vast room filled with towering stacks of objects accumulated over centuries. "Merlin's beard," McGonagall breathed, taking in the sight. "I had no idea this existed within the castle." "It's incredible," Hermione agreed, her eyes wide. "Think of the history here. Think of the treasure hunt we're about to have, Ron corrected Riley. This could take days. Not necessarily, Harry said, activating the goblin device. It began to emit a soft humming sound and glowed with a faint blue light. This should lead us to the Horcrux. Let's split up but stay within shouting distance. If the detector starts reacting strongly, call everyone over. They separated, moving carefully through the narrow paths between mountains of discarded objects. Harry found himself in an area that seemed dedicated to forbidden items, banned potions ingredients, restricted books, and what appeared to be a cage of long-dead fanged frisbees. The detector hummed steadily but showed no significant change until he rounded a particularly large pile of broken furniture. Suddenly, the device vibrated in his hand, its blue glow intensifying. "I think I've got something," he called out. "Over here." The others converged on his location, following the sound of his voice through the labyrinthine stacks. As they gathered around, Harry moved slowly in the direction that caused the detector to react most strongly. "It's leading me toward that cabinet," he said, pointing to a large, black cabinet with a broken door. Atop it sat a blistered old bust wearing a dusty wig and what appeared to be an ancient, discolored tiara. "That's it!" Hermione exclaimed. "That must be Ravenclaw's diadem." As Harry approached, the detector glowed brilliant blue and vibrated so intensely he nearly dropped it. "Definitely a Horcrux," he confirmed grimly. "Don't touch it directly," McGonagall warned. "After what the goblins discovered about the ring, we must assume it's protected by curses." She conjured a silk cloth and carefully levitated the diadem onto it, wrapping the fabric around the artifact without making direct contact. The moment it was secured, Harry felt a palpable sense of relief, as though a subtle malevolence had been contained. "We need the Sword of Gryffindor now," he said. "It's in the Headmaster's office." "Professor Flitwick granted me access," McGonagall replied. "Let's proceed there immediately." They made their way to the Headmaster's office, the diadem securely wrapped and levitated before them. The gargoyle guarding the entrance moved aside at McGonagall's password, Unity, revealing the spiral staircase beyond. The office looked different under Flitwick's temporary occupation. The silver instruments that had cluttered Dumbledore's desk were gone, replaced by neatly organized stacks of parchment and several ancient-looking books. Fawkes's perch stood empty. The phoenix had disappeared the day Dumbledore was suspended and had not returned. "The sword is displayed here," McGonagall said, approaching a glass case on the wall that contained Gryffindor's sword. Its ruby-encrusted hilt gleamed in the morning light streaming through the windows. She opened the case and carefully removed the sword. "As a true Gryffindor who pulled this from the Sorting Hat, Potter, you should be the one to use it." Harry accepted the weapon, feeling its perfect balance and the subtle magic humming within the blade. "Where should we do this?" "Here, I think," McGonagall decided, clearing Flitwick's desk with a wave of her wand. "Place the wrapped diadem there." Harry positioned the silk-wrapped Horcrux on the desk while the others formed a circle around it. With a nod from McGonagall, he carefully unwrapped the diadem, revealing its tarnished beauty. Despite its age and corruption, the craftsmanship was exquisite, delicate silver work framing a large, deep blue sapphire. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure," Hermione read the faint inscription, her voice barely above a whisper. "To think Voldemort corrupted something so beautiful and historically significant." "Stand back," Harry instructed, raising the sword. "We don't know how it will react." The others moved away from the desk, wands drawn as a precaution. Harry took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand. This wasn't just about destroying the Horcrux, it was about rejecting the path Dumbledore had laid out for him, about taking control of his own destiny. With a swift, decisive motion, he brought the sword down on the diadem. The blade sheared through the silver and sapphire as though they were butter, splitting the Horcrux cleanly in two. A terrible scream rent the air, high, cold, and inhuman. Black smoke poured from the broken halves of the diadem, forming a writhing cloud that shaped itself momentarily into a distorted face before dissipating entirely. In the sudden silence that followed, they all stared at the destroyed artifact, its pieces now inert and harmless on the desk. "That's 4 gone," Harry said quietly. "The diary, the ring, the locket, and now the diadem. Just the cup and Voldemort himself remain." "The cup is contained in the Lestrange vault," McGonagall reminded them. "The goblins are working on a legal strategy to access it for destruction." "And then Voldemort becomes mortal again," Ginny said, her voice steady despite the paleness of her face. The memory of her possession by the diary Horcrux clearly remained vivid. "Yes," Harry agreed. "Mortal, and defeatable." As they contemplated this significant step forward, the office door opened to admit Professor Flitwick and an unexpected visitor, Draco Malfoy. "I apologize for the interruption," Flitwick squeaked, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Mr. Malfoy insisted on speaking with Mr. Potter on an urgent matter." "I see you've been busy." Draco stared at the destroyed diadem and the sword in Harry's hand, his pale face registering shock before he carefully composed his features. "We've just completed some important business," McGonagall said smoothly. "But I believe we're finished now. Potter, do you wish to speak with Mr. Malfoy?" Harry studied his longtime rival, remembering Narcissa's request that he hear her son out. "Yes, I'll talk with him. Alone, if that's all right." His friends looked uncertain, but McGonagall nodded. "Very well. We'll give you the office for a few minutes. Professor Flitwick, perhaps we could discuss the item's historical significance in your office?" Understanding the need for discretion, Flitwick agreed quickly. "Of course, Minerva. This way, everyone." As the others filed out, Harry and Draco were left alone in the headmaster's office, facing each other across 5 years of mutual antagonism. "So," Harry said, carefully setting Gryffindor's sword aside. "Your mother said you wanted to talk." Draco's gaze flickered to the destroyed diadem, then back to Harry's face. "That was one of them, wasn't it? One of the Dark Lord's objects?" Harry tensed. "How do you know about that?" "My mother explained some things," Draco replied. "Not everything, but enough." He paused, visibly struggling with what to say next. "Look, Potter, I'm not here to pretend we're suddenly going to be friends. Too much has happened between us." "Agreed," Harry said warily. "So why are you here?" Draco drew himself up, the familiar Malfoy pride evident in his posture even as something new, something almost like humility, showed in his eyes. "I'm here to propose a truce," he said formally. "Recent events have made it clear that the political landscape is shifting. My mother believes, and I agree, that continuing our feud serves neither of our interests." Harry raised an eyebrow. "A truce? Just like that? After years of trying to get me expelled, insulting my friends, mocking me at every turn?" "I said it was a truce, not an apology tour," Draco retorted, some of his usual sharpness returning. Then, with visible effort, he moderated his tone. "But yes, I'm proposing we set aside our past antagonism and adopt a position of mutual non-interference." "Why?" Harry asked bluntly. "What changed?" Draco hesitated, then spoke with surprising candor. "Everything's changed, Potter. My father's choices have put our family in a precarious position. The Dark Lord's return wasn't the triumph he expected, it's been a nightmare. My mother is trying to ensure our family's survival regardless of how this conflict ends." "And you?" Harry pressed. "What do you want?" "I want a future," Draco replied simply. "I want to graduate from Hogwarts, take my place in society, and live my life without being a casualty in someone else's war, whether that's the Dark Lord's or Dumbledore's." The honesty in Draco's voice was unexpected and compelling. Harry considered the proposal, weighing his instinctive distrust against the practical advantages of neutrality with the Malfoy heir. "All right," he said finally. "A truce. No more sabotaging each other's potions, no more hexes in the corridors, no more insults." "Agreed," Draco said, offering his hand. Harry looked at the extended hand, remembering their first meeting on the Hogwarts Express when he'd rejected Draco's friendship offer. This wasn't friendship, it was pragmatism, politics, survival. But perhaps it was also growth, a recognition that the childish rivalries of their early years at Hogwarts had no place in the war they now faced. He took Draco's hand, shaking it firmly. "One condition," he added. "The truce extends to my friends as well. No more mudblood comments to Hermione, no more poverty jokes about the Weasleys." Draco's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. But tell Weasley to lay off the Death Eater comments about my father." "Fair enough," Harry agreed. "Is that it?" "One more thing," Draco said, lowering his voice despite their privacy. "My mother wanted me to tell you. The Dark Lord is planning something involving the Department of Mysteries. Something to do with the prophecy you mentioned in your interview with the Quibbler." Harry's eyes widened. This was valuable intelligence, confirmation of his suspicions about Voldemort's interests and a warning to prepare. "Why is she telling me this?" he asked. "I told you," Draco replied. "She's positioning our family to survive. Helping you in small ways creates options, depending on how events unfold." The calculating practicality was so quintessentially Slytherin that Harry almost smiled. Not good versus evil, but a careful balancing of risks and advantages. "Thank your mother for the information," he said. "And, thank her for what she did. Bringing my mother's letter to the Goblins. I know it wasn't just for my benefit, but I'm grateful nonetheless." Draco nodded stiffly. "I'll tell her." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One last thing, Potter. Whatever that procedure did to you at Gringotts, it changed you. Your magical signature feels different. You can sense that?" Harry asked, surprised. "Some purebloods are trained in magical sensitivity from childhood," Draco explained with a hint of his old smugness. "You feel stronger. Clearer." His eyes narrowed slightly. "The Dark Lord will notice too, when you next encounter him. Be prepared for that." With that parting advice, half warning, half grudging respect, Draco left, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Harry remained in the headmaster's office, contemplating this unexpected development. A truce with Draco Malfoy. Intelligence about Voldemort's plans. Another step toward rendering the Dark Lord mortal. The world had indeed changed dramatically in just a few days. And Harry Potter, free from both Dumbledore's manipulations and Voldemort's soul fragment, was changing with it, growing into the wizard he was always meant to be, not the weapon or martyr others had tried to shape. As he gathered the pieces of the destroyed diadem to return to the Goblins, Harry felt a sense of purpose and clarity that had eluded him for years. The path ahead remained dangerous, the final confrontation with Voldemort inevitable. But for the first time, he was walking that path on his own terms, guided by his own choices rather than a prophecy or an old man's grand design. Whatever came next, he would face it as himself, just Harry. And somehow, that seemed like the most powerful position of all. Chapter 3, Rising from the Ashes. The next week at Hogwarts unfolded in a blur of activity as the wizarding world continued to reel from the revelations about Dumbledore. The Daily Prophet published a new exposé each day, each more damaging than the last. Former students came forward with accounts of Dumbledore's selective favoritism, strategic manipulations, and questionable decisions over his decades as headmaster. The Wizengamot convened emergency sessions to review his past rulings as chief warlock, finding disturbing patterns of judicial activism that had shaped wizarding society according to his personal vision. Through it all, Harry maintained a determined focus on his immediate goals, his studies, the remaining Horcrux, and rebuilding his life without Dumbledore's shadow looming over him. The truce with Draco Malfoy held, creating ripple effects throughout the school's social dynamics. Without the constant Potter-Malfoy feud polarizing the student body, inter-house relations began to thaw. Small study groups formed with mixed house membership, particularly among fifth years facing their upcoming OWL exams. Harry found himself at the center of one such group in the library on a rainy Thursday afternoon, surrounded by an unlikely collection of peers, Hermione and Ron, of course, but also Neville, Susan Bones from Hufflepuff, Padma Patil from Ravenclaw, and, most surprisingly, Daphne Greengrass and Blaise Zabini from Slytherin. The trick with the shield charm, Harry was explaining, demonstrating the wand movement without actually casting, is to visualize the shield forming not just in front of you, but wrapping around slightly at the edges. Makes it stronger against spells coming at angles. That's not in the textbook, Padma noted, practicing the movement. It's not, Harry agreed. But it works. I learned it by necessity, not theory. Show us again, Daphne requested, her Ice Queen demeanor softened by genuine interest. The visualization part. As Harry guided them through the mental component of the spell, he caught Hermione watching him with a small, proud smile. She'd noticed the change in his teaching style, more confident, more nuanced, drawing on his practical experience while incorporating the theoretical underpinnings she valued. We should practice casting, Susan suggested. The room of requirement would be perfect. Good idea, Harry agreed. Tomorrow evening? Say 7 o'clock. As they finalized plans, Blaise Zabini, who had said little throughout the session, leaned forward. Potter, he said quietly, there's something you should know. Umbridge is planning something. She's been in private communication with the minister daily. Harry raised an eyebrow. How do you know that? Blaise's smile was subtle. My mother entertains ministry officials frequently. People talk when they think no one important is listening. This casual intelligence sharing was perhaps the most unexpected benefit of the Interhouse study group. Information flowed more freely, creating a more complete picture of the political landscape affecting Hogwarts. Susan's aunt kept her informed about DMLE matters, Padma's father worked in international magical cooperation, and the Slytherins had their own networks of family connections. Any idea what she's planning? Ron asked, his initial suspicion of the Slytherins giving way to pragmatic acceptance. Educational Decree No. 28, Blaise replied. Giving her authority to conduct comprehensive evaluations of students suspected of seditious activities. That's outrageous, Hermione hissed. She can't possibly, she can with Fudge's backing, Susan interrupted grimly. Auntie's fighting it, but Fudge still controls the Wizengamot majority. Harry absorbed this information calmly, another piece in the complex puzzle of wizarding politics he was finally learning to navigate. We'll need to be careful with the defense practice sessions then. Keep them quiet, restrict membership to people we absolutely trust. I can create enchanted coins for communication, Hermione suggested. Protean charm, like the Dark Mark, but for notifying members about meeting times. The Slytherins looked impressed despite themselves at Hermione's casual mention of advanced magic. As their session concluded and the group dispersed, Harry remained behind with Ron and Hermione. That went well, Hermione observed once they were alone. I never thought I'd see the day when Daphne Greengrass asked you for advice. Things are changing, Harry agreed. But we need to be realistic about Umbridge. If she gets this new decree, we'll handle it, Ron said with newfound confidence. We've got people in every house now, information from different sources. We're not as isolated as before. Harry nodded, appreciating how Ron, too, had grown beyond the knee-jerk hostility toward all things Slytherin that had defined their earlier years. The revelations about Dumbledore had forced all of them to reevaluate their assumptions. Any word from the Goblins about the cup? Hermione asked, lowering her voice further. Sirius is meeting with them tomorrow, Harry replied. Apparently they've found a legal precedent involving cursed artifacts that might allow them to remove it from the Lestrange vault. He's coming to Hogwarts afterward to update me. The prospect of seeing his godfather again brightened Harry's mood considerably. Sirius had been a constant presence over the past week, visiting every other day and sending daily letters in between. Free from the constraints of hiding, he had thrown himself into his role as Harry's guardian with enthusiasm, advocating fiercely for Harry's interests while respecting his autonomy in a way Dumbledore never had. "And how's the other thing coming along?" Ron asked, tapping his own forehead to indicate Harry's scar. "Better every day," Harry said truthfully. "The headaches are completely gone. My magic feels— I don't know how to describe it. More responsive. Like there's no resistance anymore when I cast." "Professor Flitwick mentioned you've been setting records in charms practice," Hermione noted. "And I saw what you did in Transfiguration yesterday." McGonagall was speechless. Harry smiled, remembering the look on McGonagall's face when he transfigured not just his hedgehog into a pincushion as assigned, but simultaneously transformed all the failed attempts on the practice table into perfect specimens with a single sweeping gesture. The magic had flowed through him effortlessly, his intention translating to results without the struggle he'd always experienced before. "It's like I've been trying to see through foggy glasses all my life, and suddenly everything's clear," he tried to explain. "The theory makes sense now, the wand work feels natural, and my magic just cooperates." "Bloody brilliant," Ron said admiringly. "Bet Snape's loving it." Harry grimaced. "Actually, he's been avoiding me completely. Hasn't made eye contact in class, doesn't comment on my potions, just marks them and moves on." "That's strange," Hermione mused. "I wonder if it has something to do with his relationship with Dumbledore. They were always close. Or maybe he's finally realized he's been treating Harry unfairly all these years because of Dumbledore's manipulation," Ron suggested. "Could be feeling guilty." "Snape? Guilty?" Harry shook his head. "I think he's just recalculating his position now that the power dynamics have changed. Speaking of which," he checked his watch. "I need to head to McGonagall's office. We're discussing summer arrangements with Sirius." The idea of summer away from the Dursleys still felt surreal, a gift he hardly dared believe was permanent. Sirius had purchased a comfortable cottage near Hogsmeade with extensive grounds and strong protective wards, designed to be both a home and a training facility where Harry could practice magic without ministry interference. "Tell Sirius we said hello," Hermione said, gathering her books. "And don't forget we're meeting Neville later to go through those family grimoires his grandmother sent." Another unexpected development of the past week had been Augusta Longbottom's enthusiastic response to the rekindled connection between Harry and Neville. The Formidable Witch had sent her grandson several Potter Longbottom collaborative research journals from the 1970s, when Harry's father and Neville's had worked together on combat magic innovations. "Wouldn't miss it," Harry assured her. "See you at dinner." As they parted ways, Harry made his way through the castle corridors, nodding to students who greeted him. The way people looked at him had changed, not with the awe or suspicion he'd endured in the past, but with a complex mix of sympathy, curiosity, and a new kind of respect. He was no longer just the boy who lived or Dumbledore's protege, but Harry Potter in his own right, a young wizard coming into his power and taking control of his destiny. It was a change he was still getting used to, but one he welcomed. Minerva McGonagall's office had become something of a command center over the past week, hosting strategy sessions with various combinations of Order members, Ministry allies, Goblin representatives, and Harry's inner circle. Today, the space was arranged for a smaller meeting, with tea service set out and comfortable chairs drawn up around the fire. Sirius arrived precisely on time, looking more like the handsome young man in Harry's parents' wedding photos and less like the haunted escapee from Azkaban. Regular meals, proper healing potions, and the weight of innocence officially recognized had worked wonders. "Harry," he exclaimed, pulling his godson into a warm embrace. "How's my favorite revolutionary?" Harry grinned, returning the hug without the self-consciousness that might have plagued him before. "Causing just enough trouble to keep things interesting." "How was the meeting at Gringotts?" "Productive," Sirius replied, accepting a cup of tea from McGonagall with a nod of thanks. "The Goblins have identified a loophole in the Lestrange Vault contract. Apparently, there's a clause prohibiting the storage of items that could potentially destabilize Gringotts itself, meant for things like explosive potions or uncontrolled magical creatures, but they're arguing successfully that a soul fragment of Voldemort qualifies as a security threat to the bank. So they can remove it? Harry asked eagerly. Better than that, Sirius said, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction. They've already done it. The cup is in their possession and scheduled for destruction tomorrow morning in a ritual similar to the one they used on the locket and ring. That's fantastic news, McGonagall said, setting down her teacup with a decisive click. With the diadem already destroyed, that accounts for all the Horcruxes we know of. Except Voldemort himself, Harry noted. Once the cup is gone, he'll be mortal again. The weight of that reality settled over the room. Voldemort, mortal. Defeatable. After years of seemingly insurmountable odds, victory was suddenly within reach. There's something else, Sirius added, his expression turning more serious. The goblins discovered something interesting about the cup during their examination. It appears Voldemort didn't just turn these objects into Horcruxes, he also placed additional enchantments on them. The cup, for instance, had a compulsion charm designed to affect anyone with Hufflepuff blood. What kind of compulsion? McGonagall asked sharply. A loyalty transfer, Sirius explained. It would subtly influence descendants of Hufflepuff to feel loyalty to the cup's owner, Voldemort, rather than their traditional allegiances. That's disturbing, Harry said. Do you think the other Horcruxes had similar enchantments? The goblins believe so, Sirius confirmed. The diadem likely affected those with Ravenclaw heritage, the locket those with connections to Slytherin. And the diary? Harry asked, thinking of Ginny's possession. That one was different, more direct in its approach. But they all seem designed to manipulate key segments of wizarding society, particularly those with connections to the founders. McGonagall's expression was grave. This suggests a more comprehensive strategy than we realized. Not just immortality, but a plan to fragment and control Wizarding Britain through these artifacts. Exactly, Sirius agreed. Which makes their destruction even more significant. We're not just removing his immortality, we're dismantling his power structure. The implications were enormous. Harry tried to imagine what might have happened had Voldemort successfully planted all these Horcruxes in strategic locations, slowly exerting influence over descendants of all four founders. Combined with his open campaign of terror, it would have created an insidious, multi-layered attack on wizarding society itself. Has anyone told Dumbledore about this? Harry asked suddenly, voicing the question that had been lingering in his mind. McGonagall and Sirius exchanged glances. No, McGonagall answered. Albus remains under house arrest and magical monitoring. While the investigation continues, he's been isolated from developments regarding the Horcruxes. Do you think he knew? Harry pressed. About the additional enchantments, I mean. If he did, and he didn't tell anyone. It would be consistent with his pattern of withholding critical information, Sirius finished, his voice hard. Controlling who knows what, playing pieces on a chessboard. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, shadows dancing across their thoughtful faces. Harry had been avoiding thinking directly about Dumbledore, focusing instead on practical matters, the Horcruxes, his studies, rebuilding his life. But the questions remained, persistent and troubling. What had Dumbledore really known? What had he planned for Harry? Would they ever know the full extent of his manipulations? I want to talk to him, Harry said abruptly. Both adults looked at him in surprise. Are you certain that's wise? McGonagall asked carefully. Probably not, Harry admitted. But I need to. I don't know, look him in the eye. Ask him directly why he did what he did. Before we move forward, I need that closure. Sirius studied his godson's face for a long moment before nodding slowly. I understand. If you're sure about this, I'll arrange it, with conditions. I'll be present the entire time, and the meeting will take place on neutral ground with magical monitoring to ensure he can't influence you. That seems reasonable, McGonagall agreed, though concern lingered in her eyes. When would you want this meeting to occur? After the cup is destroyed, Harry decided. When Voldemort is truly mortal again. I want to face Dumbledore from a position of having succeeded where he failed, or never truly tried. There was a fierce pride in Sirius's smile. Well said. Now, shall we discuss more pleasant matters? I've completed the ward work on the cottage, and I think you'll be particularly interested in the training room I've set up. The conversation shifted to summer plans, class progress, and the politics of Hogwarts under Flitwick's interim leadership. By the time they concluded their meeting, the tense moment had passed, though the decision remained. Harry would confront Dumbledore, not as the pawn in his grand strategy, but as his own person, Harry Potter, making his own choices, following his own path. It was a confrontation long overdue. The next morning, while the Goblins conducted their ritual to destroy Hufflepuff's cup miles beneath Gringotts, Hogwarts received an unexpected visitor. The entire student body was at breakfast when the great doors of the hall swung open to admit Amelia Bones, accompanied by 2 senior Aurors and, surprisingly, Cornelius Fudge himself. The Minister for Magic looked distinctly uncomfortable, his lime green bowler hat clutched in his hands, his face pale and drawn. By contrast, Madame Bones moved with confident purpose, her monocle glinting in the morning light as she surveyed the hall. Professor Flitwick rose from the headmaster's chair. Madame Bones, Minister Fudge. This is an unexpected honor. Professor Flitwick, Bones acknowledged. I apologize for the intrusion, but we have an important announcement for the student body. With your permission. Flitwick gestured graciously to the podium. By all means. A hush fell over the hall as Madame Bones took her position, with Fudge standing awkwardly at her side. At the Gryffindor table, Harry exchanged significant glances with his friends. This was unusual. Ministry officials typically didn't address the student body directly, especially not the minister himself. Students of Hogwarts, Bones began, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. As head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, it is my duty to keep the wizarding community informed of significant threats to public safety. After extensive investigation and in light of new evidence, the Ministry of Magic is officially acknowledging the return of the wizard known as Lord Voldemort. A collective gasp rippled through the hall, followed by an outbreak of frightened whispers. Harry sat frozen in shock. After months of denial, of being called a liar and attention seeker, the ministry was finally admitting the truth. Bones continued, undeterred by the reaction. Recent events at the Department of Mysteries, combined with testimony from multiple credible witnesses, have confirmed what some have been claiming for nearly a year. Voldemort has returned in corporeal form and is actively gathering followers. At the staff table, Umbridge had gone deathly pale, her mouth working soundlessly like a fish out of water. Beside Harry, Ron whispered, "Bloody hell, they're actually admitting it." Bones gestured to Fudge, who stepped forward reluctantly. The minister cleared his throat several times before speaking, his voice lacking its usual pompous confidence. "Students," he began unsteadily, "it is with deep regret that I must acknowledge the ministry's delay in recognizing this threat. We believed we were acting in the public interest by maintaining calm, but in doing so, we failed in our primary responsibility, to keep you safe through honest information." He glanced at Harry, a flicker of something like shame crossing his features before he continued. "Specifically, I owe an apology to Mr. Harry Potter, whose account of Lord Voldemort's return was accurate and has now been fully verified." Every eye in the hall turned to Harry, who maintained a carefully neutral expression despite the surge of vindication he felt. After nearly a year of being vilified in the press, of Umbridge's persecution, of whispers and doubts from his fellow students, the truth was finally being acknowledged. In light of this development, Bones resumed, taking back control of the announcement, the ministry is implementing new security measures throughout magical Britain. For Hogwarts specifically, a contingent of Aurors will be stationed at the school to supplement existing protections. Educational Decree No. 28 has been rescinded. She paused as a cheer erupted from many students. And instead, we will be instituting a voluntary defense training program for 6th and 7th years interested in joining the effort against Voldemort after graduation. At the Gryffindor table, the members of what they had informally dubbed the Defense Association exchanged excited looks. Their secret practice sessions might soon have official sanction. Additionally, Bones continued once the noise had subsided, Professor Dolores Umbridge will be returning to her duties at the Ministry, effective immediately. This announcement provoked the loudest reaction yet, unrestrained applause from 3 of the 4 house tables, with even the Slytherins offering polite acknowledgement. Umbridge herself appeared to be on the verge of apoplexy, her face cycling through various shades of purple as she realized she was being publicly dismissed. Professor Flitwick will continue as acting headmaster until the end of the term, Fudge added, at which point the Board of Governors will convene to determine permanent leadership for the school. As the announcements concluded and the ministry delegation moved to speak with the staff in more detail, the Great Hall erupted into a frenzy of excited conversation. Harry found himself surrounded by classmates offering congratulations and apologies in equal measure. "I always believed you, Harry," insisted a Hufflepuff who had prominently worn a "Potter Stinks" badge the previous year. "We knew the ministry was covering it up," declared a Ravenclaw who had actively avoided Harry in the corridors for months. Harry accepted it all with a gracious nod, neither calling out the hypocrisy nor reveling in his vindication. What mattered wasn't who had believed him then, but who would stand with him now that the truth was known. "This changes everything," Hermione whispered as the initial excitement began to die down. "If the ministry is acknowledging Voldemort's return, it means we're finally fighting the same enemy instead of each other," Harry completed her thought. And it couldn't have come at a better time. For at that very moment, miles away in the ritual chambers of Gringotts, the goblins were completing the destruction of the final Horcrux. Harry could almost feel the shift in the magical world's balance, a restoration of natural order as Voldemort's fractured soul lost another anchor. One more step toward the final confrontation. One more piece falling into place. By mid-afternoon, the news of the ministry's announcement had spread throughout Wizarding Britain. The Daily Prophet published a special edition with the headline, "He's Back, Ministry Confirms Potter's Claim," accompanied by a formal statement from the minister and a detailed account of the evidence that had forced this public acknowledgement. What the general public didn't know, what only a select few were aware of, was the event that had finally broken through Fudge's denial, an attempted break-in at the Department of Mysteries the previous night. A group of Death Eaters, led by Lucius Malfoy himself, had tried to access the Hall of Prophecies, only to be intercepted by Aurors acting on intelligence from an anonymous source. The resulting battle had been brief but decisive. 2 Death Eaters were captured, 3 escaped, and Lucius Malfoy was severely injured while fleeing. Most importantly, the Death Eaters had been clearly identified, making it impossible for the ministry to continue denying Voldemort's return. What no one outside Harry's inner circle knew was the source of the intelligence that had enabled the Aurors to prepare their ambush, Narcissa Malfoy. Through channels known only to her, she had warned Amelia Bones of her husband's mission, timing the tip precisely to ensure Lucius would be incapacitated but not killed, removing him from Voldemort's service while preserving his life and the Malfoy family's options. Harry learned these details from Sirius during a secure Floo call to McGonagall's office late that afternoon. "Narcissa played it perfectly," Sirius explained, his face flickering in the green flames. "Lucius is in St. Mungo's underguard, too injured to be imprisoned immediately but clearly bound for Azkaban once he recovers. This gives her time to secure family assets and position Draco as the acting head of House Malfoy in his father's absence. She sacrificed her husband to protect her son," Harry observed, not quite able to determine how he felt about such calculated ruthlessness. "The Black family way," Sirius confirmed grimly. "Family above all, but define family narrowly when necessary. Narcissa always was the most strategically minded of my cousins." "What about the prophecy?" Harry asked. "The one Voldemort was after." Sirius's expression turned serious. "It remains secure for now, but this attempt confirms he's fixated on obtaining it. The Goblins sent word an hour ago, the cup has been destroyed. With all Horcruxes eliminated, Voldemort may become more desperate, more aggressive in his attempts to hear the full prophecy. Then perhaps it's time Mr. Potter heard it himself, McGonagall suggested, joining the conversation from her desk. If he is to face the Dark Lord, as now seems inevitable, he should do so with complete information. Agreed, Sirius said without hesitation. Unlike Dumbledore, I don't believe in keeping Harry in the dark for his own protection. Madame Bones has authorized a visit to the Department of Mysteries tomorrow, if you're willing. Harry nodded firmly. Absolutely. I need, to know exactly what it says. Then it's settled, Sirius replied. I'll come to Hogwarts in the morning to escort you to the Ministry. Bring Ron and Hermione if you wish, I suspect you'll want to discuss it with them afterward. After finalizing the arrangements and ending the call, Harry turned to McGonagall, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. Professor, he prompted. I was just thinking, she said quietly, how differently things might have unfolded had Albus simply been honest with you from the beginning. Had he shared the prophecy when you first asked about Voldemort's interest in you, had he told you about the Horcruxes when he confirmed Voldemort's return, had he treated you as a person rather than a piece in his grand strategy? We'll never know, Harry said, surprised by the lack of bitterness he felt. The anger that had consumed him when he first learned of Dumbledore's manipulations had mellowed into something more complex, disappointment, certainly, but also a kind of tired acceptance. Dumbledore had made his choices, and now they were all living with the consequences. No, McGonagall agreed. We won't. But we can learn from his mistakes as we move forward. She straightened, her usual brisk manner reasserting itself. Now, I believe you have a study session with Mr. Longbottom this evening. The Potter Longbottom research journals have proved quite illuminating, I understand. Harry smiled at the change of subject. They're brilliant. My dad and Neville's were working on some really advanced applications of transfiguration in dueling. There's this technique for partial transmutation of the battlefield that Neville thinks we might be able to adapt. As he outlined the discoveries they'd made in the old research journals, Harry felt a renewed connection to his parents, not just through photographs or others' memories, but through their work, their ideas, their magical innovation. It was a legacy Dumbledore had kept from him, whether deliberately or through neglect, and reclaiming it felt like another step toward wholeness. Tomorrow would bring the prophecy, the day after his confrontation with Dumbledore. But tonight was for learning, for friendship, for the simple joy of discovering magic his father had created decades ago, magic that might help Harry forge his own path forward. The Department of Mysteries was even more unsettling in daylight than it had been in Harry's dreams. The circular room with its identical doors still spun dizzyingly when closed, the Hall of Prophecy still stretched into shadowy infinity with its rows of dusty orbs, and the very air seemed to hum with strange, unknowable magic. But this time, Harry wasn't an intruder or a dreamer. He walked these mysterious corridors with official escort, Sirius at his side, Madame Bones leading the way, and Ron and Hermione following close behind, their eyes wide with fascination. The Hall of Prophecy contains records of every prophecy made in Britain for the past 1,000 years, Bones explained as they approached the central chamber. Each orb is accessible only to those named within the prophecy itself, a security measure that has proved most effective. That's why Voldemort couldn't just take it himself, Harry realized. He needed me to retrieve it. Precisely, Bones confirmed. Which is why yesterday's attempt was particularly concerning. The Death Eaters were equipped with specialized magical tools designed to circumvent the protections, tools that shouldn't exist outside unspeakable research. Suggesting a leak within the department itself, Sirius added grimly. Indeed. We're conducting internal investigations, but in the meantime, it seemed prudent to allow you to hear the prophecy under controlled circumstances. That way, even if Voldemort eventually obtains it, he gains no advantage you don't already possess. They entered the vast, dimly lit Hall of Prophecy, their footsteps echoing against the stone floor. Rows of towering shelves stretched in every direction, each laden with glass orbs containing swirling, misty light. Bones led them confidently through the labyrinth, eventually stopping at a dusty shelf labeled 1980. "Here we are," she said, pointing to a small orb with a yellowed label. "SPT to APWBD, Dark Lord and Harry Potter." Harry stared at the innocuous-looking sphere that had shaped his entire life, the reason his parents had gone into hiding, the reason Voldemort had targeted him, the reason for so much death and suffering. It seemed impossible that something so small could have caused so much damage. "Only you can remove it from the shelf, Mr. Potter," Bones instructed. "Once you do, we'll proceed to a secure viewing room where you can hear its contents privately." With a deep breath, Harry reached for the prophecy orb. It felt warm to his touch, almost alive, the mist within swirling more actively as his fingers closed around it. No alarms sounded, no magical barriers activated, the prophecy recognized him as its rightful recipient. They retreated to a small chamber nearby, designed specifically for prophecy viewings. Once sealed inside, Bones showed Harry how to activate the orb by placing it on a runed pedestal in the center of the room. "We'll give you privacy for the initial viewing," she said. "When you're ready for your friends to hear it, simply touch this rune." She indicated a symbol on the pedestal's edge. "Take as much time as you need." As Bones stepped outside, Sirius squeezed Harry's shoulder supportively. "Whatever it says, remember, prophecies are interpreted, not absolute. You've already changed the course of events Dumbledore thought were fixed. You can keep doing so." With that reassurance, Sirius joined Ron and Hermione near the door, giving Harry space to approach the pedestal alone. With steady hands, he placed the prophecy orb on the designated circle. Immediately, the orb's mist expanded upward, forming the figure of a woman Harry recognized with a jolt, Professor Trelawney. But not the Trelawney he knew. This version had rigid posture, glassy eyes, and spoke in a harsh, deep voice utterly unlike her normal dreamy tones, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. "Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the seventh month dies." The mist figure collapsed back into the orb, leaving the room in silence. Harry stood motionless, absorbing the words that had dictated the course of his life before he was even born. After hearing Dumbledore's abbreviated version, the full prophecy contained few surprises, but hearing it directly, in Trelawney's possessed voice, made it viscerally real in a way Dumbledore's explanation never had. After several minutes of quiet contemplation, Harry touched the rune to admit his friends and godfather. They entered cautiously, reading his expression for clues about the prophecy's content. "I'd like you to hear it," he said simply, reactivating the orb. As Trelawney's prediction played again, Harry watched his friends' reactions. Hermione's analytical mind was clearly cataloging and dissecting each phrase, while Ron's expression shifted between concern and determination. Sirius, who had heard the prophecy before from Dumbledore, listened with narrowed eyes, as though searching for nuances he might have missed. When it concluded, Hermione was the first to speak. "That's both more and less than I expected." "How do you mean?" Harry asked. "Well, it confirms you're the one who can defeat Voldemort, which we already knew. But it's frustratingly vague about the power he knows not, and what exactly neither can live while the other survives means." "Classic divination doublespeak," Ron muttered. No offense to Trelawney, but couldn't she have been a bit more specific? "That's not how true prophecies work," Sirius explained. "They're glimpses of possible futures, not detailed roadmaps. Their very ambiguity leaves room for human choice and interpretation. What I find interesting," Hermione continued thoughtfully, "is that nowhere does it actually state you must sacrifice yourself, as Dumbledore seemed to believe. Either must die at the hand of the other could simply mean that only you can kill Voldemort, and only Voldemort can kill you, but it doesn't guarantee either outcome. And neither can live while the other survives is really about the connection between you," Ron added, surprising them with his insight. "Which makes sense, you couldn't really live properly with his Horcrux in your scar, could you? Harry considered this interpretation. So by removing the Horcrux, you've already fulfilled part of the prophecy, Sirius concluded. You're truly living now, in a way you couldn't while carrying his soul fragment. A wave of relief washed over Harry. The prophecy wasn't a death sentence after all, at least, not necessarily. It simply confirmed what he already knew, that eventually, he and Voldemort would face each other, and only one would walk away. The power he knows not, he mused. Dumbledore always said it was love. Perhaps, Sirius acknowledged. But I think it's more complex than that. Voldemort understands the concept of love, even if he doesn't value it. What he truly doesn't comprehend is sacrifice freely given, loyalty freely offered, magic performed for protection rather than dominance. And now your magic itself, Hermione added. Since the Horcrux removal, your magical signature has changed. The way you cast, the power you can channel, it's different from anything Voldemort would recognize from your previous encounters. Harry nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. So we continue as we have been, hunting his Horcruxes, building our skills, gathering allies. And when the time comes to face him, you'll be ready, Ron said with simple confidence. And you won't be alone. As they prepared to leave the Department of Mysteries, Harry felt the weight of the prophecy settling into its proper place in his understanding, not as an inescapable doom, but as one factor among many shaping his path forward. Dumbledore had viewed it as the central organizing principle of Harry's life, but Harry now saw it differently, as a challenge to be met on his own terms, with his own strengths, supported by those who stood with him by choice rather than prophetic obligation. It was one more step away from being Dumbledore's weapon or sacrifice, and toward being simply Harry, making his own choices, writing his own story. The next day dawned clear and cold, a perfect Scottish spring morning with frost glittering on the Hogwarts grounds and mist rising from the lake. Harry woke early, watching the sunrise from his dormitory window as he mentally prepared for the day ahead. Today he would face Dumbledore. The meeting had been arranged with meticulous attention to security and neutrality. It would take place in a ministry conference room, with Madame Bones in attendance as an official observer and Sirius present as Harry's guardian. Dumbledore would be under magical monitoring to prevent any attempt at legilimency or subtle compulsion charms. After breakfast with his friends, who offered encouragement and support but didn't press him about his thoughts, Harry met McGonagall at the castle entrance. She would accompany him to the ministry before returning to Hogwarts, leaving him with Sirius for the actual confrontation. "Are you certain you're ready for this, Potter?" she asked as they walked toward the boundary where they could apparate. "As ready as I'll ever be," Harry replied honestly. "I need answers, Professor. Real ones, not more riddles or half-truths." "I understand," she said, her voice gentler than her classroom tone. "Just remember that Albus is a master of words. He may offer explanations that sound reasonable while still avoiding full disclosure." "I know," Harry acknowledged. "But I've spent years trying to decode his mysterious comments and enigmatic smiles. This time, I want plain speech, or nothing at all." They reached the apparition point, and McGonagall offered her arm. "Hold tight, Potter." Side-along apparition remains disorienting even when expected. With a crack, they vanished from Hogwarts and reappeared in the Ministry's designated arrival area. Despite it being a weekend, the atrium was bustling with activity. The recent confirmation of Voldemort's return had created a surge in Ministry operations, with Aurors and officials working extended hours. Sirius was waiting for them near the security desk, looking formal in well-tailored robes of deep blue. His public exoneration had transformed his relationship with the Ministry, where once he had been Britain's most wanted criminal. Now he moved through the building with the confidence of a respected pureblood scion reclaiming his rightful place in society. Right on time, he greeted them. "Madame Bones is preparing the conference room. Dumbledore arrived 10 minutes ago, escorted from his brother's home in Hogsmeade." Harry nodded, a flutter of nervousness finally making itself known in his stomach. Despite all his preparation, all his justified anger, the prospect of confronting the man who had shaped his life so profoundly was daunting. "You'll do fine," McGonagall assured him, reading his expression accurately. "Remember why you're doing this, not for vengeance, but for understanding. For closure. And remember," Sirius added, "you're not the same person he manipulated all these years. You're stronger now, clearer. He has no power over you anymore." With those reassurances bolstering his resolve, Harry bid farewell to McGonagall and followed Sirius to the elevators. They descended to level 2, where the DMLE maintained a suite of conference rooms designed for sensitive interviews. Madame Bones met them outside a polished oak door. "Mr. Potter, Mr. Black," she greeted them formally. "The room has been prepared with standard truth-encouraging charms, not as powerful as Veritaserum, but sufficient to discourage outright lies. Mr. Dumbledore has been informed of these measures and has agreed to them." "Thank you, Madame Bones," Harry replied with equal formality. "I appreciate your assistance in this matter. The Ministry owes you a debt for your persistence regarding Voldemort's return," she said bluntly. "Facilitating this meeting is the least we can do. Shall we proceed?" At Harry's nod, she opened the door to the conference room. It was a simple space, furnished with a rectangular table and comfortable chairs. At the far end sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry's first thought was how diminished the former headmaster appeared. Without his position at Hogwarts, without the Elder Wand, confiscated during his house arrest, without the mantle of Chief Warlock or Supreme Mugwump, Dumbledore seemed smaller somehow. His robes were still purple, but a simpler cut than his usual flamboyant attire. His silver hair and beard remained immaculately groomed, but there was a weariness in his posture that Harry had never observed before. Most striking was his expression when he looked up and saw Harry, a complex mix of genuine warmth, deep sadness, and something that might have been shame. "Harry," he said softly. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "Professor," Harry replied neutrally, taking a seat across from him. Sirius settled beside Harry, while Madame Bones positioned herself at the head of the table, a neutral observer. A silence stretched between them, laden with years of unspoken truths and unanswered questions. Harry had rehearsed this conversation in his mind many times over the past days, but now, faced with the reality of Dumbledore's presence, the careful script dissolved. "Why?" he asked simply, the single word encompassing a universe of hurt and betrayal. Dumbledore held his gaze steadily. "A question with many answers, depending on which decisions you're asking about." "All of them," Harry replied. "The Dursleys. The money. Keeping me ignorant of my family history. Planning for me to die. Take your pick." Dumbledore sighed deeply, removing his half-moon spectacles to polish them, a familiar gesture that now struck Harry as a stalling tactic rather than a quirk. "I believed I was acting for the greater good," he said finally, replacing his glasses. "A phrase that has justified too many of my mistakes over too many years." "That's not an answer," Sirius interjected sharply. "That's an evasion." "You're right, of course," Dumbledore acknowledged. "Very well, let me be specific. I placed you with the Dursleys because the blood protection was real and powerful, though I now understand from the Goblins that I implemented it incorrectly, at great cost to your magical development. For that, I am truly sorry." "And the will?" Harry pressed. "My parents explicitly stated I wasn't to go there." "I believed the physical protection outweighed the emotional cost," Dumbledore admitted. "A calculation I made too easily, from a distance, without witnessing your daily suffering. As for suppressing the will, I knew if it were read publicly, my guardianship plan would be challenged. Sirius would have been granted custody, or failing him, Minerva or the Longbottoms. And that didn't fit your grand strategy," Harry concluded bitterly. "No," Dumbledore agreed quietly. "It didn't. I believed you needed to be raised away from fame and adulation, yes, but more importantly, I believed you needed to develop certain qualities that would be essential when you eventually faced Voldemort." "Qualities like what?" Harry demanded. A willingness to sacrifice myself. A desperate hunger for affection that would make me easy to manipulate. A flash of pain crossed Dumbledore's face. You think so little of me. What am I supposed to think? Harry shot back. You knew I was living in a cupboard. You knew they hated magic, hated me. And you left me there, year after year, returning me every summer despite my pleas. I thought the blood protection worth the cost, Dumbledore repeated softly. I was wrong. Harry studied him, searching for signs of the masterful manipulator he had come to suspect lurked behind the grandfatherly facade. But what he saw instead was something more human, more flawed, an old man who had made terrible choices with good intentions, who had lost perspective after decades of being treated as infallible. And the money? Sirius asked, his voice hard. How was stealing from Harry's vaults for the greater good? At this, genuine shame crossed Dumbledore's features. That is my greatest failure of judgment. It began innocently enough, using funds from the Potter estate to support your protection, Harry, and to finance the Order's operations against remaining Death Eaters. But over time, you started using it for personal gain, Harry finished. For political influence. For your own comfort. Yes, Dumbledore admitted, the single syllable seeming to cost him greatly. Power corrupts, Harry, even power wielded with the best of intentions. I began to see the Potter resources as rightfully at my disposal for any purpose I deemed worthy. It was a moral failing for which I have no excuse. The raw honesty of this confession took Harry by surprise. He had expected denials, justifications, appeals to necessity. This straightforward acknowledgement of wrongdoing seemed almost out of character for the Dumbledore he thought he knew. And the Horcrux in my scar, he asked, touching the faded lightning bolt. You knew from the beginning, didn't you? Dumbledore hesitated, then nodded slowly. I suspected from the night your parents died. I confirmed it during your first year at Hogwarts, when your scar reacted to Voldemort's proximity. And you decided I had to die to destroy it, Harry said flatly. Without ever looking for alternatives. I searched for alternatives, Dumbledore insisted, leaning forward with sudden intensity. For years, I researched methods to remove a Horcrux without harming its container. I consulted ancient texts, questioned experts in soul magic, always in abstract terms, of course, to protect your secret. But not the Goblins, Sirius noted. The one group who actually had a solution. Dumbledore's shoulders slumped slightly. An oversight born of wizarding prejudice, I fear. Like most of my kind, I underestimated goblin magic, considering it primitive or limited to metallurgy and finance. Another failing. So you planned for my death, Harry continued, pressing the point. All those tests each year, the stone, the basilisk, the tournament, they weren't just coincidences, were they? They were preparation. Not entirely, Dumbledore replied carefully. I did not orchestrate those dangers, Harry. But I did use them, use your responses to them, to gauge your readiness, your character, your capacity for the sacrifice I believed would eventually be required. Harry absorbed this, finding it both better and worse than he had imagined. Not a sadistic puppet master designing trials to test him, but an opportunist using genuine threats to shape him into the weapon or sacrifice needed for Voldemort's defeat. Did you ever see me as a person? He asked quietly. Or was I always just the boy who lived, the prophesied savior, the final piece in your strategy against Voldemort? Dumbledore's blue eyes, lacking their customary twinkle, met Harry's directly. Both, he answered with painful honesty. And therein lies perhaps my greatest moral failure. I cared for you deeply as a person, Harry, your courage, your compassion, your remarkable capacity for love despite a childhood designed to extinguish it. But I also viewed you strategically, as the keystone in Voldemort's defeat. I compartmentalized those perspectives, allowing the strategic view to dictate my actions while convincing myself my personal affection justified them. It was, Harry realized, the most honest answer Dumbledore had ever given him, an acknowledgement of the fundamental contradiction that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Not pure manipulation, but not pure mentorship either. Something messier, more human, more tragically flawed. The prophecy, Harry said, changing direction. We heard it yesterday, the full version. You always emphasize that I would have to die facing Voldemort, but that's not what it actually says, is it? No, Dumbledore admitted. It says that either must die at the hand of the other. I interpreted this, combined with my understanding of the Horcrux in your scar, to mean that Voldemort must kill you to destroy his own soul fragment, after which someone else, perhaps Neville Longbottom, as the other possible child of the prophecy, might be able to defeat him. A neat solution, Sirius observed coldly. Harry dies nobly, destroying the Horcrux, while you guide the next champion to victory. Perfectly aligned with your greater good philosophy. Dumbledore flinched visibly at the harshness of Sirius's assessment. It was not a future I desired, Sirius. It was one I feared was inevitable. Except it wasn't, Harry said. The goblins removed the Horcrux without killing me. The prophecy is still in play, but on different terms. And all the other Horcruxes have been found and destroyed, something your decades of research apparently never accomplished. A flash of surprise crossed Dumbledore's face. All of them? Truly. The diary, the ring, the locket, the diadem, and the cup, Harry confirmed. All destroyed. Voldemort is mortal again. For the first time in their conversation, Dumbledore appeared genuinely stunned. Remarkable, he breathed. How did you locate them all so quickly? We had help, Harry replied simply, not elaborating on the goblin ritual that had extracted Horcrux information from his scar's fragment. The point is, we succeeded where you failed, or never truly tried. Which makes me wonder what else in your grand strategy was unnecessary or misguided. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, absorbing this revelation. I have been outplayed, he said finally, with a hint of his old humor. And by my own former pieces, no less. There is a certain poetic justice in that, I suppose. This isn't a game, Harry said sharply. It never was. These are people's lives, my life. You're right, of course, Dumbledore acknowledged, the brief lightness vanishing. An unfortunate metaphor born of too many years viewing conflicts from a strategic distance. He paused, then asked with genuine curiosity, what will you do now, Harry? With Voldemort mortal but still at large? Face him when the time comes, Harry answered simply. But on my terms, not yours or his. With my friends beside me, not as a lone sacrifice. And after? Dumbledore pressed. Assuming victory, what then? The question took Harry by surprise. He had been so focused on the immediate challenges, removing the Horcrux, finding and destroying the others, preparing to face Voldemort, that he had given little thought to what might come after. A future beyond Voldemort had always seemed like a distant dream, not something requiring concrete plans. I don't know exactly, he admitted. Finish school. Maybe become an Auror. Build a life that's mine, not one dictated by prophecies or other people's expectations. Dumbledore nodded slowly, something like approval warming his tired eyes. A worthy ambition. And a luxury I am glad you may now have the opportunity to pursue. The conversation continued for another hour, covering specific questions Harry had accumulated over years of half-truths and manipulations. Dumbledore answered with a directness Harry had never experienced from him before, acknowledging mistakes, explaining reasoning, and occasionally defending decisions he still believed had been correct despite their painful consequences. By the time they concluded, Harry felt a complex mix of emotions, lingering anger at the manipulations he had suffered, pity for the flawed man before him, and a strange sense of liberation. The mystique of Albus Dumbledore, the all-knowing chess master moving pieces across the board of wizarding history, had been replaced by the reality of a brilliant but fallible human being who had lost perspective after decades of power and acclaim. As they prepared to leave, Dumbledore spoke one final time. Harry, I cannot undo the harm my decisions have caused you. But I want you to know that despite my failures, my pride in the young man you have become is both genuine and profound. You have surpassed every expectation, overcome every obstacle, many of which, to my shame, I placed in your path. Whatever the future holds, I believe you will meet it with the same courage and integrity that have defined your journey thus far. Harry studied him for a long moment, searching for manipulation in the praise and finding none. "Thank you, Professor," he said finally. "I hope you find peace with your decisions. I'm working on finding mine." As he and Sirius left the conference room, Harry felt as though a chapter of his life was closing, not with the dramatic confrontation or satisfying vindication he might once have imagined, but with something quieter and ultimately more meaningful: understanding. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a recognition of the human complexity behind actions that had shaped his life for good and ill. Dumbledore would face legal consequences for his financial crimes. His reputation had been permanently damaged, his positions of authority stripped away. But Harry no longer needed or wanted to see him destroyed. Justice was being served through official channels. What Harry had needed was clarity, and that he had received. "All right?" Sirius asked quietly as they walked toward the atrium. "Yeah," Harry replied, surprised to find it was true. "I think I am." "Closure?" Sirius suggested. Harry considered this. "More like perspective. Seeing him as he really is, not as the all-powerful wizard I thought he was. It makes moving forward easier somehow." Sirius nodded in understanding. "When I was in Azkaban, I built Dumbledore up in my mind as this perfect champion of the light who would surely discover the truth and free me. It was devastating when he didn't. Years later, I realized I'd been worshipping an imaginary version of the man, not the complicated reality." "Exactly," Harry agreed. "The real Dumbledore isn't a villain or a hero, he's just a person who made terrible mistakes trying to do what he thought was right." As they reached the Ministry atrium, preparing to return to Hogwarts, Harry felt lighter than he had in weeks. The confrontation with Dumbledore had been the final piece of unfinished business before he could truly focus on the challenges ahead, particularly the inevitable confrontation with Voldemort. That battle still loomed on the horizon, but for the first time, Harry felt fully prepared to meet it, not as Dumbledore's weapon or sacrifice, but as himself. Harry Potter, making his own choices, following his own path, surrounded by friends who stood with him by choice rather than manipulation or prophecy. Whatever came next, he would face it on his own terms. The final weeks of the school year passed in a flurry of activity. With Umbridge gone and the Ministry finally acknowledging Voldemort's return, Hogwarts settled into a new routine, more focused on practical defense, more cognizant of the dangers beyond its walls, but also more unified than it had been in years. Under Flitwick's interim leadership, the arbitrary educational decrees were dismantled, and a voluntary defense program was established for students interested in developing combat skills. Harry was asked to assist, sharing techniques from the Defense Association's secret practices, now conducted openly with official sanction. News from beyond Hogwarts was mixed. Voldemort had gone silent following the failed Department of Mystery's mission, withdrawing from public attacks to reassess his strategy. The Daily Prophet reported occasional Death Eater sightings, but no major incidents. The wizarding world held its breath, waiting for the next phase of the conflict to begin. On the final day of term, Harry stood at the window of Gryffindor Tower, watching students crossing the grounds toward the carriages that would take them to Hogsmeade Station. For the first time in 5 years, he wouldn't be joining them on the Hogwarts Express. Sirius would be collecting him directly, operating them to their new home near Hogsmeade, a home Harry had helped design, a place that would truly be his own rather than a temporary accommodation. "Ready?" asked a voice behind him. Harry turned to see Ron and Hermione, their trunks packed for the journey home. Despite the invitation to join Harry at Sirius's house immediately, they had both decided to spend the first few weeks with their families before visiting later in the summer. "Almost," Harry replied. "Just taking it all in. It's been quite a year." Hermione smiled wryly. "That might be the understatement of the century. From outcast to vindicated, from Dursley bound to living with Sirius, from Dumbledore's pawn to, whatever you are now. Just Harry, he said simply. Finally figuring out what that actually means. Well, just Harry, better write to us every day, Ron insisted. And be ready for visitors in July. Mum's already planning food packages to send you, by the way. She doesn't trust Sirius's cooking. Harry laughed, touched by Mrs. Weasley's continued mothering despite the revelations about Dumbledore's financial manipulations. The Weasleys had been horrified to learn they had unknowingly received Potter money, but Harry had absolutely refused to let them repay it, insisting their kindness to him had been genuine and priceless. A knock at the open dormitory door drew their attention. Neville stood there, already dressed for travel in his usual slightly rumpled way. "McGonagall sent me to find you," he said. "Sirius is here, and there's someone else who wants to see you before we leave." Curious, Harry followed Neville down to the common room, Ron and Hermione close behind. To his surprise, they found not only Sirius waiting, but also Narcissa Malfoy, looking elegant as always in robes of pale blue. "Mr. Potter," she greeted him formally. "I hope you'll excuse the intrusion, but I wanted to speak with you before the term ended." Harry glanced at Sirius, who nodded slightly, not in approval or disapproval, but acknowledgement that the choice to engage was Harry's. "Of course, Mrs. Malfoy," he replied. "What can I do for you?" Narcissa's eyes swept over the assembled Gryffindors before returning to Harry. "Perhaps somewhere more private?" McGonagall, who had evidently escorted the visitors to the tower, gestured toward a small study room off the common room. "You may use this space," she offered. With a nod of thanks, Harry led Narcissa into the room, aware of the curious gazes following them. Once the door closed, she spoke without preamble. "I've come to update you on certain matters and to propose a continuation of our arrangement." "What matters?" Harry asked, direct as always. "First, my husband," she replied calmly. "Lucius has been sentenced to Azkaban for his role in the Department of Mysteries incident. His health remains poor from injuries sustained during his capture, which may be a blessing in disguise. The Dementors would be particularly cruel to him in his weakened state." Harry studied her, trying to discern her true feelings about her husband's imprisonment. Her expression revealed nothing beyond composed acceptance. "I'm sorry for your family's difficulties," he said carefully. A flicker of surprise crossed her features before she controlled it. "Thank you for that courtesy, Mr. Potter, however unnecessary. Lucius made his choices and now faces their consequences. My concern is for Draco and the future of House Malfoy. Has Voldemort retaliated against your family for Lucius's failure?" Harry asked, getting to the heart of the matter. "Not yet," Narcissa admitted. "But it is only a matter of time. Which brings me to my proposal." She straightened, every inch the aristocratic pureblood despite the uncertainty of her family's position. "I believe our interests continue to align regarding the Dark Lord's defeat. While I cannot openly oppose him without placing Draco in immediate danger, I can provide information and certain resources that may prove valuable." "In exchange for what?" Harry asked directly. "Your continued neutrality toward House Malfoy," Narcissa replied. "And, should circumstances develop favorably, your public acknowledgement after the conflict that we provided assistance. Not unlike your godfather's family motto, toujours per, may be the Black family's public face, but toujours survivor has always been our true guiding principle." Harry couldn't help but smile slightly at her candor. There was something refreshing about Narcissa's straightforward self-interest, her unapologetic prioritization of her family's survival over ideology or alliances. "That seems reasonable," he agreed. "Though I can't control how others will view your family's history after the war." "I am not seeking absolution, Mr. Potter," Narcissa clarified. "Merely survival and the opportunity to rebuild. The Malfoy name has weathered worse storms over the centuries." Harry nodded, accepting this pragmatic approach. "And the information you mentioned?" "The Dark Lord has taken residence at Malfoy Manor," she revealed, her composure slipping slightly at this admission. My ancestral home has become his headquarters, my son effectively a hostage to ensure my cooperation. He is planning something significant for late summer, an operation targeting you directly, though I don't yet know the details. The news was sobering but not entirely unexpected. With all his Horcruxes destroyed, Voldemort would be eager to eliminate Harry before facing him in direct combat. Thank you for the warning, Harry said sincerely. Is there anything I can do for Draco? Some protection we can arrange? Again, that flicker of surprise crossed Narcissa's face. You would offer my son protection? After your history? Draco and I have reached an understanding, Harry replied simply. And no child should suffer for their parents' choices, something I understand better than most. For the first time in their acquaintance, Narcissa's aristocratic mask fell completely, revealing raw maternal concern beneath. Thank you, she said softly. But for now, Draco is safer appearing to follow the expected path. The Dark Lord values him as a potential recruit and as leverage over our family. If he suspected Draco's loyalty was divided. She didn't need to complete the thought. Harry nodded in understanding. If circumstances change, the offer stands. In the meantime, any intelligence you can safely provide will be appreciated. I'll establish a secure communication method before you leave today, Narcissa promised, composure restored. And Mr. Potter, thank you for hearing me out. My sister Andromeda always said Lily Evans had an exceptional capacity for seeing beyond house rivalries and family histories. It appears her son shares that quality. With that parting observation, she moved toward the door, their business concluded with the same efficiency that had characterized their unlikely alliance from the beginning. Before she could exit, however, Harry spoke once more. Mrs. Malfoy, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. In my mother's letter, and again in the one from both my parents, there was a phrase, the phoenix burns, but who tends the ashes? Did you ever discover what it meant? Narcissa paused, her hand on the doorknob. I did not, she admitted. Though I suspect it may be a reference to Dumbledore, or more specifically, to the limitations of his vision. A phoenix rises from its own ashes, self-renewing, self-contained. Perhaps your mother was suggesting that Dumbledore's focus on grand cycles of conflict and resolution blinded him to the human cost of his strategies. It was an insightful interpretation, one that aligned with what Harry had learned about Dumbledore's perspective over the years. The former headmaster had always seen the big picture, perhaps at the expense of the individuals within it. Thank you, Harry said. That makes sense. With a final nod, Narcissa departed, leaving Harry alone with his thoughts. After a moment, he rejoined his friends and godfather in the common room. Everything all right? Sirius asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Fine, Harry assured him. Just some information sharing and pragmatic alliance maintenance. Sirius laughed. You're sounding more like a proper head of house every day. James would be impressed, and slightly terrified. As they said their goodbyes, temporary partings, with plans already made for summer visits, Harry felt a profound sense of contentment despite the challenges that still lay ahead. In just a few short weeks, his entire world had transformed. He had gone from isolated, manipulated, and carrying a literal piece of Voldemort within him to surrounded by genuine support, aware of his true heritage, and finally free to be himself. Voldemort remained a threat, one that would need to be confronted sooner or later. But Harry would face that confrontation on entirely different terms than Dumbledore had planned, not as a sacrificial lamb, but as a young wizard coming fully into his power, supported by friends and allies who stood with him by choice. As he and Sirius walked through the great oak doors of Hogwarts into the summer sunshine, Harry glanced back at the castle that had been his first true home. It remained a sanctuary, a place of learning and growth, but it no longer defined the boundaries of his world. Ahead lay a summer of training, planning, and perhaps most importantly, simply living, experiencing the normal joys and connections that Dumbledore's grand strategy had nearly cost him. Ready to see the new place? Sirius asked, eyes bright with enthusiasm. I've set up that training room we discussed, and Remus helped with the library. Even got a proper Quidditch pitch marked out in the back field. Harry smiled, warmth spreading through him at his godfather's obvious excitement. "Lead the way," he said. "I can't wait to see home." As they reached the boundary of the Hogwarts grounds, Sirius offered his arm for side-along apparition. With a crack, they vanished, leaving behind the castle where Harry Potter, the boy who lived, had been shaped by prophecy and manipulation, and moving toward a future where Harry Potter, just Harry, would shape his own destiny. The phoenix had burned, but from the ashes rose not another cycle of the same pattern, but something entirely new, a young wizard with the power, knowledge, and support to change the very narrative Dumbledore had believed inevitable. And in that transformation lay a power the Dark Lord truly knew not. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.